All right, so good evening, everyone. We're going to reconvene the Brattleboro Select Board meeting. Today is Tuesday, July 25th. John, I asked once already, but I'll ask again. Was this special meeting properly warned?
Yes, Ian, it was.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, so I'll look for a motion on the minutes.
I move that the minutes be approved as submitted.
Franz has made a motion to approve the minutes of July 11th and July 18th, 2023. Any discussion on the minutes, board? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And it'll carry 5-0. Excellent. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 3, chair remarks. I do not have any remarks this evening. So on to agenda item 4, manager's comments.
And I do have a few comments tonight. So I wanted to let everybody know the fire chief and the DPW director met with representatives from FEMA that are assigned to Windham County, and they received information to help folks that have personal property damage from the flooding event of July 10th. If you have a flooded basement, for example, this could help with replacing what was damaged and potentially help with preparing for future water events, things such as raising your furnace or installing a new pump. So I'd ask people to go to disasterassistance.gov, one word, for more information, or look for social media from the town or reach out to the fire chief or the DPW director. Also, if you need assistance with removing mud or debris from your basement, you can dial 211, and the state will help get you some help with that. I wanted to update everyone on the camera system installation at the Transportation Center. All the cabling, conduits, raceways, and mounting bases have been completed. Advanced security integration will be back on site later this week to install the video server, viewing workstation, and display monitor. Hopefully, we'll have cameras online and providing video images by the first week of August. Work continues in front of the Municipal Center. The granite steps have been reset and are nice and level now. Public Works will be pouring new concrete sidewalks over the next couple of weeks. And over the summer, there will be new handrails that will get installed there. So really appreciate all the work on this from our contractor as well as the excellent DPW crews. The town's recently hired animal control officer, Crystal Crandall, is now fully trained on duty and available to help people and their animals. So you'll be seeing her around, and welcome, Crystal. Both Crystal and the town's evidence technician, Mariah Barrett, also just completed training to become nationally certified child passenger safety technicians and can offer car seat installation services. So reach out to the police department if you want help with installing car seats. A reminder on the Downtown Safety Fair. This will be on Tuesday, August 8th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at the Gibson-Aiken Senior Center at 207 Main Street. You're encouraged to come out and join in the conversation if you're concerned about safety in the downtown area. If you or your organization or business is interested in having a table at the Downtown Safety Fair, please reach out to Greg Lesh, greg@brattleboro-chamber.org. There are limited spaces left for that. Another opportunity to provide your ideas and input to help improve the town is on Monday, July 31st, next Monday, from 9:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the Living Memorial Park Pool. This is an all-day brainstorming session to talk about ways to improve and make our pool more accessible, inclusive, and welcoming for all. So come down next Monday, 9:30 to 7, anytime during that time, and let town staff know what ideas you have for a future pool facility at the park.
Did you say 9:30 to 7?
9:30 to 7. They'll be all day, and just come on down whenever you're free. And finally, as part of winning the Strongest Towns contest, a video is being produced about Brattleboro, and the videographer is going to be in town next week, August 1st through 4th. So give Sue a call if you want to be a cast as an extra. No, just kidding. Just kidding. That's all I have today.
Great. Great. Thank you very much, John. Board members, agenda items 5, select board comments and committee reports. Liz?
Thank you. So I met Crystal when I attended the Brattleboro Police Department recognition ceremony, and it was very interesting, and I learned a lot about the hard work of the police department this year, and I applaud all those who were honored and recognized. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Liz. Other board members? Peter?
Yeah, I would just like to thank the police department. They, even though I felt that what I did was, I don't know, a little performative, a little glove in hand about going and doing a ride along. I think it was last Wednesday with one of our police officers for about 3.5 hours, just to see what they deal with on a day-to-day basis. Was truly eye-opening, and I thank the chief and her department for allowing this civilian to kind of sit in the passenger seat and ask questions and go along through the paces of and get a true understanding of what those guys do in just a small snippet of time. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Peter. Any other board member comments? Franz, you're giving me that look. Is that a...
Well, I was just going to ask a clarification of Peter about his comment. Was it, what you were doing, is that called riding shotgun?
In this case, no shotgun, but yes.
Okay.
Great. All right, so we'll move on to agenda item 6, which is public participation. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak on an item that's not on the warrant agenda, and or requests that an item on the consent agenda get pulled for consideration at the end of the regularly warned meeting. So I usually just ask people to raise their hand if they want to speak in the room. Dick, come on up, and just ask that you identify yourself and where you're from for the record. Thank you.
Dick DeGray, Brattleboro. I think in the Vermont Digger article, it talked about me asking for cameras to be installed downtown and wherever the chief thought she needed them. And I think the number was 9. I'm going to make it 10. A couple of years ago, I made a request to get cameras up at the Creamery Bridge. Had a lot of theft and damage up there with flowers. The value of the flowers, I mean, I can ask 20 people and 20 people will write me a check for what the flowers are worth. But the flowers have more value to the community than the value of what they cost. The sad part about saying that is that I put something on Facebook, I get 550 likes, 70 comments. The people I need to help me are sitting right in front of me. And I don't get any help from any of you. The two gentlemen on the left, they haven't been here that long, but long enough. You've been here 5 months. It's pretty disheartening when I see the work that I do and I see the stuff that's going on in town and nothing is happening here. John, I want to thank you for your update on the cameras. And just so if we're keeping score, this is from November, and we're finally possibly going to have cameras in August. That's a pretty sad commentary. What's going on downtown, and John is aware of this, you have your safety committee. There's never any update on what that committee's doing or talking about. I find that really disheartening, and I spoke to Kate at DBA because I get no update from them, and then suggested to her that we should be getting updates. I'm a building owner downtown. Or the chamber, I'm a member of the chamber, I get nothing from them, and I hear nothing from the town. And I see really no action going on downtown. Downtown is the worst that it's been in my lifetime in Brattleboro, which is roughly 40 plus years. And I've been associated downtown for the last 25. And it can't, I want to say it can't get much worse, but it can. The stuff that I see at night when I'm out, I'm on the street at 3 o'clock. The stuff that's going on during the day, we had a building owner, I think he had a conversation with you, and he actually told me I could use his name. I won't, John, about him losing a tenant because the potential tenants for the apartment that he had said that the downtown is just too unsafe. They don't want to live there. And we're going to get a film because we're the #1 city, and they're going to come downtown and film what's going on. Maybe we can move the film out to West Brattleboro. Because I certainly don't want to have people see what's going on downtown. So, John, if you can give me an update, actually, when I sit down about what's being discussed at those meetings and what action you're taking, that would be great. As a taxpayer and a building owner downtown, who's very concerned about the climate, what's going on downtown.
Dick, I'll just ask you to finish your comment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Because we have some real issues going downtown with vacancies. And if I'm new to the community or coming into the community, I'm going to go, I don't think I want to do business downtown. So I think we're in a very fragile state, and you are the people that can get the ship turned around, and I hope I see some more action, because I really haven't seen any at all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Dick. John, if you just want to, when is did you speak to it on these comments on the meeting in August for the downtown?
Yeah, so the group that Dick is referring to has the thing that they've really been focused on is putting together this downtown safety fair on August 8th. That is an opportunity for people to get together and come together and try to come up with ideas. I mean, I'm hearing a lot of complaints, but I'm not hearing a lot of ideas like what can we do to make it better. So, that would be very helpful, and that's the purpose of this fair on August 8th. So.
Excellent. Thank you. And then I think I can't speak for the agenda setting committee, but I think it's a reasonable question to hear how those meetings have been going bi-monthly, and we can potentially put that on the agenda for the 15th just to hear how it's been going. But also we can hear how that meeting went, or how that event went on the 8th. So thank you very much, Dick.
Can I ask a question?
Very briefly, but then I'm letting
The meetings of the committee that Dick was referring to, are they publicized or open to the public, or, I'm just thinking maybe we need to keep a closer eye on that.
No, it's been a small group. They've been by invitation. They're trying to have, it's the Chamber of Commerce and the Downtown Brattleboro Association, the police, youth services, groundworks, and that's pretty much who's in those meetings. There's been requests to expand the group, and I've asked the group their thoughts on that, and the general sense has been, let's try to keep it small for now, and we'll figure out if we need to do something additional. And, that's certainly part of the conversation.
Okay.
There are others I know that want to, try to help out, and that's wonderful, and, there may be a way to find another venue for that.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So I don't see any hands on Zoom. Patrick, can you just move the mouse to make sure that's not a person with their hand up? Thank you. Nope. Anyone else in the room wish to speak on public participation? I saw the chief's hand first. I'm going to let the chief go. Dora.
Actually, this is an IT thing. So,
Or if you just want to identify yourself.
Dora Bubalis, Brattleboro. So, I've been trying to pull together the materials to follow the meeting. I find it really difficult to read everything on the phone, which is my first access to internet. And so I went over to the library and I tried to print out a bunch of materials, like $7 worth of stuff. And half of the pages were not formatted properly. So, and there are also a lot of repeats, so the point I'm going to make is that we finally entered the 20th century by making all the materials available to the public. Let's enter the 21st century by having a policy about how things are supposed to be formatted. I mean, obviously you guys are formatting it to print it out for the Selectboard. So first of all, they should all be formatted to be able to be read on any device. And they should be in a printable format so people can do that easily. And that's the only thing I'm going to say.
Great. Thank you very much, Dora. If I can just ask that you can contact the town manager's office after this meeting so that we can really understand the issue, so that we can make sure that the material is printable. It's really important that everyone can read and have access to it. And I want to just because it's an opportunity to touch on it. One of the things that I'm excited about for the new website is that it is going to be designed so that it is mobile friendly. So it'll be kind of different if you're accessing it from a desktop versus on your phone. And when it's on your phone, when you go to a website that's actually designed to be on a phone, the Brattleboro town website will be that way. And I would hope hope that when you clicked on a link there, that the document it brought up would also be mobile friendly. So really appreciate the comment. And yeah, just because that's a little unclear, I just want to make sure that we're able to make sure we know exactly what the issue is. So if you can just speak with the town manager's office, Jessica Stickler is one of the people who works on formatting the documents and stuff. So we'll make sure that we get it right. So thank you. Still no hands on Zoom. Anyone else wish to speak in the public participation? Chief? Welcome.
Hello. I'll be brief. I just wanted to come in tonight because unfortunately, while dealing with family tragedy that my family has had to endure, I missed last select board meeting. And when I watched the video for it, I saw that I was actually accused of assaulting someone, and I feel that I cannot stay quiet on such an accusation, being the chief of police, if someone says that I assaulted them. And I just wanted to address that. For some reason, I've been targeted for many other complaints by this individual, but to the point of saying that I assaulted them is absolutely not true. And I just want to go on record that saying I have not assaulted anyone, you know. And someone might think that it's not necessary for me to say that, but I do believe that it is, because when someone says anything that, even if it's not true, if they say it in such an emphatic fashion, I need to stand up and speak up for myself. So that's why I want to take the opportunity. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Chief. John.
I would just like to address that as well, Ian. And so there were some complaints brought to the town, and the town investigated those complaints and found that all of the allegations that were being made were false and unfounded, and you know, we're in total disregard of the truth, and so we closed that investigation. And as far as the town's concerned, that matter is over.
Great. Thank you very much, John. Yeah, and that this is not really a forum to discuss this matter any further. The investigation was conducted, if I understand, concluded, found to be entirely false. And so we'll move on to the next public participant. Still no hands on Zoom. And if I don't see any going once, going twice, all right, we're going to move on. So the first agenda item is the consent agenda. So John, do you want to speak for just a brief moment on?
Yeah, we only have one item on consent. It's a bid award for a culvert replacement on Sunset Lake Road. And by approving the consent agenda, the board would be awarding a contract to Belco Excavating for a total of $106,000 for that work.
Great. Thank you very much, John. Board, anyone wish to pull that agenda item from consent? Seeing none, I'd look for a motion. Franz?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Franz has made a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's going to carry 5-0. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 9, new business A, which is, I actually should have addressed this during my comments. We were notified that there is currently no applicant for the Windham Southeast Supervisory Union Board appointment. So that agenda item is essentially just not going to occur. And I will just take a moment to encourage people that if they're interested in applying to that position, you can send a letter of interest. And I'm sure there's information that can be found if you were to look it up, but I don't have it on me right now. So no motion necessary, board, and we will move forward to agenda item 9B, which is the Heart Rose Club outside consumption permit. Am I handing this over to?
Wait, did we skip land use regs?
Oh, did I go? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Yes, I went straight to new business instead of unfinished business. So agenda item 8, unfinished business A, is the land use regulation second hearing and possible adoption. So I can invite up all of our presenters. And I apologize about that.
Hello, thanks for having us back.
Welcome back. So just procedurally here, we had our first reading 2 weeks ago. This is the second reading. We got some really interesting questions and comments from the board and from the public, which I'm hoping we'll speak on a little bit tonight. And then we'll hear from the public again. And then the board has the option as to whether to adopt or sort of send back for additional work and can be made in a motion this evening. Do I have that right?
That is correct.
Great. So do I want to just pass it over to you quickly to sort of speak
Yeah,
on?
I have kind of just an intro, I guess,
Great.
if that's okay. Like you said, this is the second public hearing on land use regulations that the Planning Commission has prepared over the last year with the assistance of a consultant. The purpose of these barriers are to reduce, of these amendments are to reduce barriers to housing production in Brattleboro, both in kind of dimensional standards and regulatory kind of review. So we gave a full presentation at the July 11th meeting. That presentation is in your packets, so I'm not going to run through that again. But I did want to address comments that we received and then point out two kind of other memos that I gave you with amendments. So at the end of June, the state legislature and the governor signed the Act 47, the Home Act, and within it, there were several amendments that went into effect July 1st. And so they're amendments that, are statutorily required. And so whether our land use regulations or reflect them or not, we're going to have to implement them. So there was one memo that had several amendments that deal with those things. And that has to do with who can appeal a decision, either of the DRB, or of the zoning administrator, hotels, and allowing their use if the state is using them for unhoused people. So there's a series of amendments that are, required of the state. There was one additional amendment, which was that the Planning Commission is proposing, and that is to allow administrative review of minor subdivisions. So minor subdivisions in Brattleboro are creation of 4 lots or less, no new roads. And what it can do is, it speeds up the process. It reduces costs. These are pretty perfunctory in most situations. They can be reviewed by the administrative officer. If the administrative officer wants to, he could pass them along to the DRB if there was something, a little uncomfortable about it. We have a process whereby we send it to other departments to make sure they have a chance to review, and any decision that was issued could be appealed. So it's really about just reducing time and cost to applicants who want to create new lots. They still have to meet all the standards of the regulations. So that's one of the amendments that the Planning Commission has recommended. And both of those, both the amendments to comply with Act 47.
One second, Sue. Are we able to hear in the back?
Not very well.
That's what I thought.
Would be appreciated.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, Sue, do you mind just giving introductions to everybody?
Sure.
And then once you do
Yeah.
that, if you can just speak up a little bit so that everyone can hear you.
Sure, my apologies. I'm Sue Fillion. I'm the planning director.
I'm Steve Hayes. I'm the planning technician.
I'm Tom Mosikowski, the chair of the Planning Commission.
And I appreciate that. Second reading, got a little lazy, so.
Both of those amendments, both the Act 47 amendments and if we were to do the minor subdivision, are considered things that the types of amendments that are minor and the select board could make tonight. That's what the town attorney has advised.
Okay.
At the last public hearing, we received comments about, the first one was about an alternative way to measure the front setback in the residential neighborhood zoning districts. The proposal was to have an average setback for the entire zoning district. Staff does not prefer that option. And in fact, the work that we did is kind of, it is in conformance with best practice where you set a minimum front setback and a maximum front setback. So you allow a little variation within there. And then we still have the option of, in those, unique circumstances where there might be, I'm thinking like in the Clark Canal area where they're older homes, they tend to be right close to the right-of-way or to the front setback. There's still the option of measuring it by an average of, a certain distance. So it gives the flexibility, but it doesn't impose it in all the residential neighborhood areas. We were very careful in doing the work. Steve analyzed the parcels on GIS, so we know that we're reducing nonconformity. It's not perfect, but again, that's where the relief valve of the average setback comes into play. So again, we would prefer the select board not make that amendment. If you want to see that, that is something the town attorney felt should be sent back to the planning commission because it affects a whole lot of properties, and it's a different way that we're currently measuring it.
And would we just send back that one part and approve the rest, or would it all? Okay.
It would all go back.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the second comment we had was about the mixed-use neighborhood zoning district, particularly in the area of Canal Street, kind of between Clark Street and Washington Street. That's an area that's currently zoned as residential neighborhood, and the suggestion was to put that into the mixed-use neighborhood zoning district. The opposite side of Canal Street from that is zoned mixed-use neighborhood, and I believe the person that spoke to it felt that, could be a benefit to allow a larger building footprint. That's really the only difference, and the uses. Those are the two main differences between the residential neighborhood and the mixed-use neighborhood. That zoning district was set in 2015 when the Planning Commission did a complete overhaul of the land use regulations. And preceding that work, we had a consultant work with us to look at our commercial districts, look at the commercial master plans that were in place and, kind of even them out, look at market trends. And it was found at that time that we did not need more land for commercial and retail uses. And furthermore, that area was already in residential zoning use. So, we had enough. That was not a growing sector. We still feel that to be the case and would prefer to leave it in the residential neighborhood. In addition to that, if it did change to the mixed-use neighborhood, you could develop it with a residential use. You could develop it with a commercial use. There's no requirement that it be a mixed-use building. Mm-hmm. It's really just allows more uses encompassing the commercial uses. So again, we're not in favor of that change. That was another change that the town attorney felt would be a larger change and should go back to the planning commission. Should the board be interested in doing that?
Yeah, excellent. Let's have a unless is there other.
The only thing I wanted to say is if you were to adopt the land use regulations tonight, they would be effective 21 days later. So starting tomorrow, I counted it. That would be August 17th. If it could be petitioned to be overturned with 5% of the voters could petition for it, and then it would go to Australian ballot, and they would need to file a petition by August 16th, 20 days after.
After the vote to approve it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So let's have a motion first. Peter?
All right, I will motion to adopt the amendments to the Brattleboro Land Use and Development Regulations as presented in the June 5th, 2023 draft, and to include the amendments for administrative review of the minor subdivisions and conformance with Act 47 as detailed in the July 17th and July 18th memos.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Peter. All right, board, we've got a motion. Franz, you had your hand up. Do you want to?
Yeah, I just have a question for our panel there. So the Canal Street commercial residential zoning question that you just described, I had understood, perhaps incorrectly, that the proposed change would create less flexibility in terms of uses for buildings in that area. But what I think I just heard you say is that actually the proposed language would preserve flexibility for uses in that area. Can you straighten me out on that?
Well, it preserves what exists now in terms of uses, and it gives the amendments we're making would allow for larger building sizes, more stories on it, and a reduced setback. So if you're comparing it between the existing, you get those flexibilities, but not in terms of uses. There is another amendment, which is the neighborhood commercial unit, which does allow a little bit of could allow for some more commercial use in that kind of area between Clark and Washington. Does that make sense?
Get a little more clarity, maybe?
I'm sure it does. Although, wouldn't it be beneficial to allow bigger buildings or something? Maybe there's different types of flexibility, and I'm just getting confused of what flexibility means in this situation.
Do you want to give a shot, or do you want to?
Sure. So, yeah, it is true that the mixed-use district, as we've proposed, would allow for larger building footprints than the residential 3,600. But we are certainly of the opinion that one of the critical things about the residential neighborhood district is that it doesn't allow for primary commercial use on a site. We have introduced that flexibility for neighborhood commercial units that would allow for essentially accessory use that's commercial, so it would still allow for small business opportunity, but it can't replace the housing. And so that's not the case per se with any other zoning district. You could, by right, propose to change the use of a, say, 4-unit apartment building to a commercial use in the mixed-use district, whereas you could not do that in the residential neighborhood district because you can't have a primary commercial use. So we think for preserving housing, that is actually a critical distinction.
Thank you.
Great. Other board members? Liz, did I see your hand? Yes.
Once again, I commend the planning department and the planning commission for all their hard work. I know that this work is built upon the planning and development regulations that have been years in process. But these in particular, I think, serve as a model for the state in terms of providing opportunities for more housing and growth in a responsible and measured way. And I definitely will approve and vote for this amendment. And again, I thank you for them.
Great. Thank you very much, Liz. Other board members, and then we'll open it up for public comment. No? All right, so anyone wish to speak on this? Frick, I saw your hand right up first, and then we'll go to Zoom. Yep.
Hey, Frick Sprite, District 3. As ever, I think we need a balance of commercial and residential. And if there was ever a place where leaving flexibility would make sense, I personally believe that unnecessary inflexibility is not to the advantage of the town on any occasion. But in this case, when we're talking about most of a street being mixed use or commercial and carving out a little section of one side of the street as purely residential makes absolutely no sense, especially when it's on what's effectively an interstate throughway through town on the way to New Hampshire. Which I beg to differ with Daniel, is not the same as Western Avenue, which is not an interstate throughway as Canal Street is on the way to Hinsdale. Both in terms of its current usage and its also current largely commercial makeup. It's ideal for commercial stuff because of the traffic. It's not ideal for residential, even though obviously some people choose to live there or have to live there. So I would urge you at a minimum to hold off on this and look at it more closely.
Great. Thank you very much, Frick. I see on Zoom, is it Audrey?
Hey there.
Welcome.
I'm going to say hello and then I'm going to turn my video off because I may have challenges with my internet.
No problem. Just identify yourself and where you're from for the record.
Yep, I'm Audrey Garfield. I'm from Brattleboro and my pronouns are she, her. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Well, I want to thank the Planning Department and the Planning Commission for such an enormous undertaking. It's really an impressive body of work. And I know that it's a lot of work. And I also want to express my appreciation that, you know, some of these efforts, these amendments, these trends were trends that I wanted to see happen and fought for when I was on the Planning Commission and subsequently on the Select Board over 15 years ago. So it's really nice to see Brattleboro finally making some inroads with high density and multi-use, etc. I do have some questions about Chapter 6 in the Planning Services Report. And then I have a question specifically about Section 116 in the land use regulations. I want to touch for a moment on what was just about the neighborhood between Clark and Washington. I appreciate, I've forgotten your name, I'm sorry, but I appreciate what you had to say about you know, preserving the housing that we already have in Brattleboro. I think that's really important. I also think that that neighborhood, that community provides some of the most affordable housing in Brattleboro. So I think it would be a shame to disrupt that. So, you know, the Planning Services Report, Chapter 6, Housing, Goal B, to increase the housing supply to serve residents of all income levels, age groups, and special needs. Goal D, provide equal housing opportunities for all residents of Brattleboro. Policy 6.4, continue to support affordable housing for low to moderate income households. And action 6.4.1, continue to support efforts to develop new home ownership and rental opportunities that are affordable. And I'm wondering if someone can speak to how these goals and policies and actions, how the amendments that are being proposed address these efforts specifically. So for instance, I understand that we hope that increasing density will lead that the opportunity to build more housing will lead to more affordable housing across all income levels and opportunities for home ownership. But can you help me understand how the amendments proposed literally do that? How do they address these points specifically?
Great. Thank you, Audrey. I understand you have a second question. I like to ask people keep their comments to about 3 minutes. So we'll work on this first one. I've got at least one other hand that we'll hear from, and then we'll get back to you to hear your second question. So
okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Is the question clear enough?
Yeah, I mean, we could probably spend all day talking about that.
I understand that. Yeah, fair. But do you think you could speak to it briefly?
Yeah. So what a lot of the amendments, one of the big features of the land use regulations or amendments is a missing middle housing overlay district, which allows for permitted, administrative review of housing projects within kind of our water sewer service areas, that can go up to 10 units, 9 units, sorry, 10 units. And that take the form of kind of what we see in our neighborhoods that surround downtown. Maybe it's row houses like you might see on Valgar Street. Maybe it's a large apartment building like you see on the corner of Oak Street and High Street. And those are, ways to build up, have greater height, more number of units in a easier administrative kind of review process. And so those are bringing down the cost of the development by allowing more housing units.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's particularly important when we're talking about reducing barriers to housing production is certainty is something that's incredibly valuable to the people who will be developing housing. That can often decide whether they would actually pursue a project or not. And so you're correct in seeing this as a fairly indirect approach to addressing housing affordability, but that's ultimately the lever that we can pull as planners. We're essentially setting the table here for the people who do have the ability to build housing, and that may well also include nonprofit and even public entities, but someone who is not the planning department ultimately will have to build the housing. So what we're doing is removing barriers to housing insofar as they make sense to remove, and greater supply will lead to more affordable housing. There are several ways that can happen, and supply is certainly one of the most effective ones.
And some of the other things, some of the other amendments tackle, design requirements that we've had on buildings. So, a certain percentage of units, if it's a multi-unit, need to have private open space, so like a balcony or a deck. Those all drive up costs. They also are required to have a certain amount of open space amenity, even if it's just for the complex. Those add cost and take away land that, might have more units on it. And we don't impose those kind of requirements on single unit developments. So it's really trying to not add too much extra cost to development. And when we say affordable, I mean, it's affordable at all ranges. We're not talking, just about subsidized capital A affordable housing. Really trying to make it affordable, whether it's 60 to 150, so that people in the community or who want to move to the community can afford a unit here.
I think it might be helpful if I add briefly just a couple really like down to earth tangible examples that we also added, which were in the report. For accessory dwelling units, we've eliminated the bedroom requirement, right? That was defined as a single bedroom unit. So now 2 people or 3 could be sleeping in there in different bedrooms. And also rooming and boarding houses, which is a very affordable way of living compared to having your own house. Certainly that's now allowed in every zoning district where housing is allowed. And some where it wasn't allowed, it's now conditional or permitted. And some where it's conditional, it's now permitted. And it was already allowed in a few. So those are 2 very typically affordable forms of housing. And they're much more allowed now and expanded.
Great. Yeah, and I'm sure we'll probably hear even more answers to that as we get more questions from Audrey and other people, because it all speaks to this issue of the housing crisis. So I had a hand here.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Reuter. I'm a private homeowner on Maple Street. I'm not educated. I'm here to learn more. It's just all a new language happening around me. I was out of town when Winston Prouty had invited the neighbors to come and learn about the development that they are proposing on their land, and heard an earful from a particular neighbor about all of the environmental challenges and disregard that she perceived. So I'm here to learn, so first and foremost. But I also have So I don't know whether my questions or my wonderings have a place in this particular seemingly very formal environment. I can't quote parts of the reports and recommendations, et cetera. But on Maple Street, I'm right across from Belmont, and so we have a fair amount of traffic roaring up the hill, the little hill on Maple Street, parking on both sides in some places, and I'm really concerned about a huge number of housing units going up at the Winston Prouty property without knowing what kind of town support is going to be done for traffic control, for environmentally correct land use, et cetera. And so that's why I'm here. And that's what I would like to know. I know it seems to be, I read most of the initial report, and it seems, it's a lot of foreign language. So it just makes me more anxious.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, those are my questions.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca, very much for that. And I appreciate the honesty on, not fully knowing all of it, and also that you're here to understand and learn more. And I tried not to keep this too formal. So, but I think I'm not really sure how related it is, the question, but if you'd be willing to speak to it briefly, I think it's a really good question. Where a lot of these proposed amendments would hopefully encourage additional housing units. How does the town plan to address potential increased traffic and traffic patterns that would result in these? Do these amendments entertain that, or is that going to occur somewhere else in the municipal apparatus?
Yeah. So first, what I would say, one of the proposed amendments in this is a change to the zoning district map that would affect the already developed part of Winston Prouty campus to enable housing. Right now, it's zoned as an institutional campus, and there really isn't housing allowed there. So that is kind of directly related, yeah.
So that's pretty much what it said, only.
Yeah.
That's all it said.
Yeah. So the point that Winston Prouty is at right now is kind of like a master planning, a conceptual plan. Like, we'd like to add housing to this campus. If at the point, they are working with a developer or they are the developer, they will need to, when they actually have a concrete project, they're going to have to submit it to the town's planning department. We have a development review process, the rules of which are in the regulations, but are not changing in that manner. And there is a separate board, so you can think of the select board's really the legislators, but for the purposes of where I'm going. The Planning Commission writes and recommends the land use regulations, and the select board has the adoption authority. But they kind of write it, and then the Development Review Board actually implements them, looks at development that's proposed, and looks and reviews them. They're kind of like the judges, right? So they do the review of it. We do have provisions that talk to traffic and, kind of offsite impact. So if that time comes, they will, need to be looking at the traffic that the site will be generated. I also happen to know that I think at the neighborhood meeting, they understood that there was a lot of concern, and they are going to be doing some of that work up front, which is early because it's a planning process, but they know it's a big concern in the community. I would also say, as someone that staffs the Traffic Safety Committee,
That's the other place I was going to go.
we do have complaints about Maple Street and the speed and the visibility and some of the intersections. I think you probably have noticed that Public Works has done a temporary project at the intersection of Maple and Fairview to try to slow traffic. We know that there's more that can be done there, and we're going to be working with Winston Prouty and their consultant to look at those intersections and see how it can be handled. So, obviously there's the zoning district change to allow that. We have an acute housing shortage need in this community. So making good use of our water and sewer system and putting it where there is a good road system is desirable from the department's standpoint, but there are impacts from development that would definitely be reviewed. And there are also environmental standards in the land use regulations. There's buffers from wetlands and rivers and restrictions on developing on steep slopes that would all be reviewed by the Development Review Board.
So that's.
If you want to just come up and.
So that was one of my concerns. So that's not impacted by a general approval of such, what you're discussing tonight?
No.
Those environmental impacts all have to go through the regular?
Yes.
Okay, so this just wasn't clear to me.
We haven't made any proposed changes to any of the environmental regulations that we have. We've only specifically removed regulations that we thought were unnecessarily blocking the ability of folks to build more housing.
Yeah.
For one more important piece, the Act 250 jurisdiction is already in place on the parcel that Winston Prouty is on, so they'll have to go through that process no matter what they do.
Thank you. That was my other question about that. Okay.
Great.
Thanks.
I'll just speak very briefly to two things. One, Winston Prouty has come to the board meetings about this, and we've requested that they come back and present again when they've got they're further down in the plan to make sure that the public is aware of what's going on. So I'd really encourage you to keep an eye out for those meetings. I wish I had a date. I don't. I'm not really sure. I'd imagine at some point this year, but that's just a guess. And then the other thing is, I would emphasize the Traffic Safety Committee. We, the Select Board, this last year increased our budget for replacing or putting in the reflective pedestrian walkway signs from 10,000 to 40,000 so that we could replace we could put in more than we had originally budgeted for. And that really came out of work by that committee. And so we listen and we hear, and it's a really active and staffed by great people. So that's also an avenue to make sure that your concerns are heard about Maple Street. So Franz?
We live in the same neighborhood. And I've been going to those meetings at Winston Prouty, and if you'd like to talk about it, I'll just leave my card here with contact information, and if you give me a call.
Okay, and I know Andre's got another question, but I saw Frick's hand. Was there anyone else that wanted to speak? Dick?
You can go out, Audrey.
Okay, her hand's not up right now, so Dick.
I really appreciate you coming forward because all this stuff is Latin to 99% of the people in the town. And having clear explanations about the impact of what can happen to you. Audrey's question was right on about affordability, and you talked about not having space behind a multiple-use house or a porch. But then you mentioned it goes to the DRB. And one of the hugest expenses when someone's bringing a project is what the DRB imposes on a project. And it adds significant costs to a project. I just talked to somebody who's moving forward with a project, and they couldn't believe all the things that the DRB was implementing on this project. So when we're talking about affordability, the DRB plays a significant role here also. And they're an independent body that I'm not sure who you appeal their decisions to.
Administrative judge.
No, it goes environmental court.
Environmental
first, and then
court.
civil.
Yeah. So that's a concern I have. And again, when you don't know these land use regulations and you go to sell your property or whatever with your property, and then you find out that something in these new land use regulations or the old ones have a significant impact on you. And as we know, we have an elderly community, and even I, who sat on the board and adopted some of these things that Sue was talking about, and I would suggest probably some of you don't even understand some of the stuff that's in there. We just go, okay, we pretend we understand it. We raise our hand. So I think it's really important that we try to clarify this as much as we can.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dick. And can you speak briefly to how these proposed changes, there are some things that would have required going in front of the DRB that would not now need to because they wouldn't be conditional use considerations anymore? Is that my understanding from the presentation last time?
Yeah.
Maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
I did also want to, if I could afterwards,
Yes.
respond to something that one of Dick's concerns about
Absolutely.
the DRB adding
Yeah.
additional things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a number of uses that we've moved from conditional to permitted, which you might have also frequently heard of as by right, which essentially means that for the use itself, the Development Review Board won't have any purview in denying that because it's no longer conditional. So there are a number of housing uses that are moving from conditional, which would have required a DRB hearing, to now simply requiring review from the zoning administrator. And so we've done that specifically to cut down on ambiguity, potential for arbitrary changes, which I think Sue will be speaking to in a second, and particularly the time that it would take to get an approval. We're also, as you may have heard earlier, we've requested that there be an amendment added so that small subdivisions and condominium conversions and things like that can simply be approved administratively and not require 2 DRB hearings as they otherwise would have. That's something that the legislature is letting municipalities choose to do, and so we're trying to do that now that we are allowed to. And we also have the missing middle overlay district that will allow for a particular range of housing types to be even easier to propose and receive approval without requiring Development Review Board hearing. And all of this was done with the explicit goal to reduce that sort of burden and delay.
And then, so you want to speak briefly?
Yeah, to Dick's comment about, the DRB can add conditions that maybe, make a project more difficult. One of the amendments that the state legislature passed had to do with not allowing the DRB to add more than either the minimum or the maximum. So, if there's an open space requirement that, maybe at 400 square feet per unit, we can't all of a sudden say, no, we need 1,000 square feet. The DRB won't be able to do that. And so that is reflected in kind of those required statutory amendments. And
Yeah.
So that,
Yeah, Liz?
I just wanted to ask Stephen a question. Those items that you said would now be as of right, there is still notice to property owners for those actions?
yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if
it doesn't
if it's
happen.
administratively reviewed, there's a zoning permit issued, it's posted. If it's a site plan, then there's notification as well through the permit posting.
Yeah, I mean, that
There's
just,
not always direct abutter notification. There is the permit posting that the public can see and.
great. And then also one of Dick's comments about the Latin. Your office will certainly entertain any member of the public who would like to discuss his property or her property in relation to these regulations. That's
Yes,
correct?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Great. So we got Audrey, and then can I just get the rest of the hands people? I got Dora. Yes, and I don't know your name, but great.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we got you.
All right, this is Audrey again. So I do want to get to my question about accessory dwelling units.
Yeah.
I just want to loop back around for one moment and say that, I appreciate the need for more housing and the urgency in that. And that, we can talk about a greater supply of housing all day long. And I wish that translated to more affordable housing, more units that are affordable. But I think the elephant in the room that has to be contended with is the greed of real estate investors. So I just want to put that out there. So the accessory dwelling unit, section 116, striking the owner occupied requirement. So when I read that, I'm curious to know what conversations happened around that decision. And I'll tell you what I fear is that will, during COVID, what we saw were a lot of folks who don't live in this community buying a property in this community and actually contributing to the problem we have now, the housing crisis. And so, I fear that removing that requirement will encourage that kind of someone who doesn't live in the community creating housing and then using it for Airbnb or price gouging on the rent. So I'm wondering if somebody can speak to conversations that happened around removing that requirement.
Great. Thank you, Audrey. And just for everyone's, just to clarify, so the question is, the proposed change would allow for accessory dwelling units in not just owner-occupied what is the word I'm looking?
Dwelling.
Dwellings? Okay, so this would allow for non-owner occupied dwellings.
Accessory dwelling units.
That we might be able to, we'll hear your question because it's a little different. So if we want to speak to that first.
Yeah. So first of all, there wasn't a whole lot of conversation about this, and I'll explain why. So the statute was changed effective July 1st to say that if you have an accessory dwelling unit, the owner it doesn't just have to live in the single unit structure. They can live in the accessory dwelling unit. So it had been that the owner had to live in the single unit. And now it can be either. On top of that, the legislature also is allowing either single family or duplex by right. So wherever you have single unit, you have to allow duplex. So it really became for us that it didn't matter if it's an ADU or if it's some other kind of arrangement. And so it was the simplest thing to do was to just strike it and say they could live in the accessory dwelling unit, or that they don't have to live on site, because there's another pathway for them to get approved. It could be as a 2-unit. Mm-hmm. And that would be permitted as well by us. So we didn't, there wasn't a lot of discussion about that. In terms of Airbnb.
Just to clarify that, so they could build the accessory dwelling unit, then duplex the building, and then they wouldn't have to live in any of it with that changes from the statutory changes. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Correct. To the Airbnb part of it, so the land use regulations are about orderly development. We don't get into, we can't control for out-of-state real estate investors. We can't, that's not something we concern ourselves with the rents, although we care about them. It's not reflected in here. With an Airbnb, we are currently not regulating them, but what we tell people when they call us about an Airbnb, or if any of those kind of companies, they're often doing their due diligence before they allow somebody to post on their platform. What we tell them is we're not currently regulating. We could regulate. We know it's not, the housing study indicated that it's not a huge problem in Brattleboro right now. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'm happy to have those conversations at another time. And that what we tell people is, if you want certainty moving forward, then you should have a resident that lives there. So that way it can then become an ADU, or it's serving as an Airbnb where you've got a host. And so that's the way we've been handling it.
If the town were to want regulation on that, would that be something that would come through this, or would it be in a separate action? I asked because I want to clarify for discussion tonight. If it's not really something that would come through here, then we can.
It can come through land use regulations.
Could come from landers, but it could also come other ways.
I would have to research that.
Okay, fair. Great.
Yeah, one more comment.
Liz, quick comment, and then we got Dora, and we got one other hand.
I just wanted to comment that these changes then started from the legislature, and that it wasn't any sort of backroom discussions from the planning board. It was the legislature.
Yeah.
And with the intent of encouraging more housing in the state.
Yeah,
Great.
if I
Yes,
can-
yeah, please.
So I would even argue that we already have the tools to regulate Airbnbs because we have regulations already for B&Bs. So if we were to treat those all identically, which I think we already would be able to, it's just a difficulty of enforcement in many cases. That requires an on-site manager. All lodging uses that could actually be proposed at a single-family site or a duplex, which is to say not a hotel. All the other lodging uses that we do provide for require an on-site manager. I've had myself many conversations with, whatever websites do these, Airbnb, Vrbo, what have you, where they don't like the lack of certainty and they decide not to allow anyone to host in this community. So we have very few, if we have them, and they're operating without a permit and in a gray area. But I also would love to speak to very briefly, the question of whether this specific change might make properties more attractive or add price to them in a way that harms folks who are looking for a place to rent or buy. We're not adding any real new property in rights or interest here for any additional development that you could have on that property through this specific change. Because as Sue mentioned, you can already have a duplex by right. In all of our developed districts, you can already have at least 4 units in a structure by right. So nothing is fundamentally changing in that regard. We're just not speaking to tenure anymore with regards to who's going to live in the ADU or the main house. And so I don't see any fundamental relationship there with a change in price. But this may well motivate some folks who might own and rent out a single-family home in town, which is a very, very small portion of our rental market, but there may be some units like that. This might motivate them to open up a second unit on that site, and that's another home that someone can live in.
Yeah. Great. Dora?
Dora Bubalis, Brattleboro. I have a couple things. Thankfully, Audrey ticked one off my list. So there are things that can be dealt with in land use regulations, and then there are things that are policy, that are law issues, that are things that the select board can deal with. There are consequences to some of the decisions that are made in land use. So, for example, if you really want more housing in the urban center, one of the things that's been a hindrance to the housing in the urban center is, for example, the solid waste ordinance not providing service to apartment buildings that have 5 or more units. So someone that has 4 units in their building is not going to add another unit because that actually makes their building less affordable, and it also makes it less rentable to the average person, because unless they provide trash pickup, that person that is then responsible for their own trash pickup. There are issues of ADA accessibility. You can't increase housing and not address the issues of the lack of ADA accessibility on the sidewalks and the roads that we already have. We have terrible ADA accessibility, and it has not really been addressed over the years. These are things that they can try to work on, but it is something that is a policy decision, and roads and sidewalks and all of that, especially in the winter, which it's horrible. So I just want to point this out because there are things that you're going to need to be looking at if you really want to make these changes. The last thing I have is in disagreement with Dick on the developers, and I understand the issues of the conditions being placed on developers, but I'm concerned that this policy of administrative approval tips the balance away from the individual private homeowner who abuts a property and their ability to be able to challenge a project in a timely manner without hiring an expensive lawyer. When it's in the DRB, there's at least some semblance of public notification, even though most people don't see those public notifications. There's also notices that are sent out to abutters. So Sue just said a few minutes ago that in these administrative approvals, the notification isn't necessarily sent out to the abutter. It's responsible on the individual property owner to notice the zoning permit.
Sure, I'll just ask you to finish your comment.
So the question I have is, what are we doing to address this? Because people already don't have the ability to challenge without hiring an expensive lawyer.
Great, thank you. Do you guys want to speak to, and just to clarify, it's not getting rid of the DRB process entirely. Like there will still be things that will require conditional use permits, which is kind of the big area where they operate in. But if it's a fair question and important point to consider. And then just to speak to your first point really quickly, totally agree. It's all hands on deck on this. There's policy decisions, there's land use decisions, and the board should be constantly thinking about ways that we can be working towards the goal of more housing and accessible housing in the town of Brattleboro. No disagreement there.
So the proposal for minor subdivision review, subdivisions are required to have a butter notification. So I think regardless of if it's administrative or if it's development review, we're going to have to do that, a butter notification, and give them a period of time to view it and comment. So it's not like, it would come in. We still have 45 days to review it. So there is a period in there where they'll be able to, I'm sure, I think the way it would operate is if there was an abutter that had a concern, we'd send that to the DRB. So if we knew that. So abutters to a subdivision will get a letter. We're required to do that by statute and letting them know it's under review. For site plan, that is not a requirement. It is, typically done by Development Review Board. We typically give notification because it's kind of just what we do. But there's also when the permit is issued and there is a big P, posted that they're required to post on the site, there is a 15 or 30-day appeal, depends on if it's a permit or if it's site plan review. There's an appeal period and it's listed on the poster, and that's kind of the statutory process we follow.
Okay.
Things that are permitted by the administrative officer can be appealed by the public, and that will always go directly to the Development Review Board, and then that would go to court if that was appealed.
Okay. And ma'am, did your question get answered on? Yes, okay. Frick, I'll give you a very, very brief one, and then we're gonna go hear back from the board.
Two quick things. One is I want to thank Dora for bringing up the issue of the 5-unit pickup situation, which got slipped in under a previous select board with no clear explanation. And now that there are, we have to pay for our garbage bags, there is actually no difference whether we picked it up or not. I had talked to Peter at Triple T way back, I don't know, a year or two ago about the subject, and he said it wouldn't change their bidding whatsoever. So I would urge the select board at some point to pick that ball up. I would also like to urge my dear Audrey and others to, as much as many of us are concerned about out-of-state and site investors and so on, to be careful about divisive rhetoric, because I think it might be counterproductive.
Thank you. I just remind everyone you address the select board when you make comments in the meeting. Thank you, Frick. All right, board. So we've heard a lot of interesting discussion and questions from the public in the second hearing. We have a motion that is currently pending. Do you have additional questions or comments? We have basically, we can vote this through, we can vote it down. Voting it down would essentially say that there's additional work that needs to be done on this. So we would want to make sure that we're giving clear guidance on what that work is. So I look to you all. Liz.
I have no amendments to make, and I suggest that we should adopt the proposal as presented.
Great, thank you, Liz. Other board members? I think for me, the only thing is about the Airbnbs. So if you want to maybe speak very briefly to if there was an opportunity to discuss Airbnb regulation in this proposal and it didn't come up, did it come up in the discussion when these were being prepared? My memory from the housing study was that after a thorough review, it was sort of determined that it was a fairly low number of Airbnbs or Verbos or whatever in the community. Is that part of what sort of resulted in that not being something that was addressed here?
No, I think our focus was on, looking for, not the temporary house, not the Airbnb, not serving the tourists, serving the people that live here. So we didn't. Within the department, we've had conversations over the years and looked at different regulations, and kind of a lot of them are based on who's staying there, how many number of nights, and in a given year. And it's really an area that we don't think we could enforce, to be honest. If you say you can stay 14 days over a 3 months period, or the homeowner has to be there for a certain number of days, we don't have the ability to enforce that.
Okay.
And so we'd be taking somebody at their word. So we've been a little hesitant to go there. We haven't seen a model that we think could work, given our capacity. And so that's really, it did not come up as part of these discussions. I don't know, Tom, if
I think maybe at meetings, what you're saying now rings a bell, actually, and I think it was brought up somewhat like that, and you chimed in saying that we don't have that enforcement capacity.
Yeah.
I mean, in the land use regs, there is a section called bed and breakfast.
Yes.
And there's regulations there. To the extent that they're, being implemented and enforced 100% is another matter, but that's not the planning commission's purview, the enforcement, really.
I do think that, the planning commission is at a juncture, depending on what happens tonight, of what do we do next? I mean, this, if
As far as
it's
topics that we're pursuing,
something- Yeah, if it's something the select board is interested in, I'm sure.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's certainly something the community is interested in. And I certainly have heard from members of the community when this has come up about Airbnb. So, Daniel.
Thanks.
And thank you for the answers on that.
Yeah, I mean, I've really appreciated these two hearings. I think they've functioned well as hearings. Yeah, I've mostly been interested in what the public has to say about these regulations rather than my own thoughts. I'm appreciative of all the work that's gone into developing these regulations. I think, I'm ready to adopt them as proposed. I think that question of short-term rental regulation is one that the community is interested in. I wouldn't want to hold up these particular regulations to pursue that. From reading the planning, from reading the housing study, it didn't seem like that was a major concern of ours. And I guess I'm kind of a little curious about whether B&B regulations actually could regulate Airbnb, which really, is kind of a misnomer. There's not a whole lot of B&B that goes on. It's just a short-term rental. So I don't know, but that feels like a question for another day, and I wouldn't want to hold up this really important body of work because of it.
Great.
I don't want to hold up anything either. This is more of a statement, maybe with a question. I literally just opened up an Airbnb app to see how many available places were in Brattleboro, and it seems like within the town of Brattleboro, there appears to be one. Is that correct?
No.
That's one with a room for tonight, maybe.
We try not to have people
Yeah.
talk out of. Thank you.
But it does not seem to be a proliferation. So is that Is that a correct assumption? I'm just wondering, we're sort of batting around this Airbnb thing like it's impacting a lot of stuff.
It's our understanding, I mean, the Housing Action Report pulled some industry data, was not finding it to be a huge, I mean, was it 70? I think that's even high.
I believe it was single digits.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that one is not accurate.
As I'm looking at it on an app, that's all.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, other board members? No? Okay, in that case, board, somebody made this motion.
I did.
Peter made a motion to adopt the amendments to the Brattleboro Land Use Development Regulations as presented in the June 5th, 2023 meeting and draft and to include the amendments for the administrative review of minor subdivisions in conformance with Act 47 as detailed in the July 17th memorandums. Board members, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's going to carry 5-0. Thank you so much for all the work and answering all of our questions. And thank you to the public for your interest and engagement on this. It's really important. And with that, we're going to move on to new business, which I tried to do prematurely before. And we're going to be on to new business agenda item B. As I mentioned earlier, the agenda item A, which was the Windham Southeast Supervisory Union Board appointment, we were notified after the agenda was warned that the one applicant had withdrawn their application, so we don't have anything to consider. So we're going to skip that one and move right on to. I think I'm allowed to just do it that way. Is that accurate?
You're allowed.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay, so we're gonna move on to new business agenda item B, which is the Heart Rose Club outside consumption permit, and I look to John.
Yes, I can do this one. We're recommending that the board approve the outside consumption permit for the Heart Rose Club located at 11 Green Street. This is formerly the Shriners Building. They are looking for a 30 by 10 deck area and a 40 by 20 area down the steps to be available for outside consumption. The application's been reviewed and approved by the Brattleboro Police and Fire Departments, and I believe Tara Cheney may or is not here. Maybe she's online, if you have any questions.
Let's see if Tara Cheney is in the Zoom.
If they could raise their hand, that would help.
So there's nothing I love more than explaining the Zoom functions. So there is a way to raise your hand. Usually it's down in the buttons, in the reaction button down at the bottom of your screen. So if you're here and you can speak on this, you can raise your hand so that Patrick can identify you and give you the opportunity to turn your mic on and your video on and speak to us. Don't see. Okay, that's fine. So there's nothing that, I don't think they're required to be here.
No,
so-
they're not required
Yeah.
to be here. They were invited to be here, and their application is complete in your packet.
Yeah, no, and town staff recommend that we do approve the
Yes.
permit. Great.
Do you need a motion for this?
I do. Yes, I was hoping to hear from them first, but now I would take a motion.
Do you want to
I,
do it? Or you want
yeah,
Got a lot of motions from this side of the room.
okay.
Liz?
have my
They're
hand up.
motion hogs. What can I say?
They are motion hogs.
I move to approve an outside consumption permit for the Heart Rose Club for the deck connected to the building located at 11 Green Street. I would also like to speak to it.
Liz has made a motion, and as the motion maker has first bite at the apple, so go right ahead.
The interesting thing in my review was that there's a railing and that the area down the steps would be fenced in. So I will vote in favor.
Great. Thank you, Liz. Other board members?
I guess I'm
Daniel.
kind of curious, knowing that area a little bit. I used to work around the corner. There's like a parking lot, and there are some residences kind of right next to it. I guess Sue would have been a good person to answer this. Are those residences informed of this request for an outdoor consumption permit?
Sue is gone.
Yeah. And It's a little similar to when the Whetstone folks opened at the former River Gardens site. You know, there were some downtown residents who were concerned about noise and that kind of thing. And, you know, I mean, the fact of the matter is when you live in that downtown center, you know, there are certain uses. I don't know. I'm not super, you know, confident on all of my planning stuff, so I'm going to stray into shaky territory pretty soon probably. But like, you know, the use for this particular purpose is permitted? Yeah?
That's our understanding, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm just kind of curious, like what the residents' kind of reaction, you know, then abutters' reaction is to it, and whether they've been given an opportunity.
I just want to take a moment to read this is page 63 of the 303 backup material under describe the type of event or OCP area. It says, will connect a barrier from the fence to the building to create a controlled and fenced-in space. And I think, you know, I think they're taking in mind the idea that they want to, you know, they're taking in mind their abutters. And I would imagine that if we're giving them this permit with this this language included in their permit, in their application, that if they weren't to do these things, that would be something that we could talk about when they came back up for renewal of the permit. Liz?
I just wanted to discuss with Daniel his comment because the location of the Shriners building, it is on the periphery of a residential area, but it's around the corner really, and this building kind of is across the way from like the hatch space.
Right. Yeah. I'm talking really about the residences on Retting Place.
Yeah, so I just think that it's, you know, I'm assuming that the parking lot is here. Can we do this?
It's like
parking lot is
fairly
to the south, and then the deck, I'm assuming, is to the east.
Okay.
And so that the direction or the flow of the activity would be to the east and not to the west where the residences are.
Fair.
So it's more towards the Green Street extension rather than Retting
Yes,
Place.
and where the hatch space and other downtown
Very good.
businesses are located.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Other board members? Always an opportunity to discuss the geography of the downtown Brattleboro.
Can't top that.
Yeah,
Dora's
fair.
got her hand up.
Yes, I see Dora's hand, and let's look see if there's any. Yes, Dora, if you want to have a brief comment.
Very good.
Thank you.
Dora Bublis, and just in response to Daniel's concern, let's not forget that the Shriners has always been a venue. So there's always been events and music things and alcohol served. It's just that it was more of a private venue. So I think it's not really a change of use. I just want to say that
It's outdoor now.
We're talking about outdoor consumption.
That's that's fairly different, right? Like it's
yeah,
gonna
but
be
they're
out.
planning on doing a enclosed space. I don't think it's going to be a big, huge thing. But anyway, they had an open house on during Gallery Walk, and it's really, really wonderful what they're doing with this space. There's going to be a lot of uses. There's a lot of people involved. And one of the things I really loved about it was the real mix of people, because it really was a cross-section of Brattleboro. It wasn't, you know, just one particular group. That if they can manage to do something that brings people together, I think it's phenomenal.
Great, thank you, Dora. I don't see under your hand. Oh, Frick.
Did I blink in this new business?
We're
doing new business.
We're on new business. Yes. Page 2.
New business,
Okay.
section B.
Oh, no, I guess public participation, so I was.
Okay, so other board members?
Is it too late to put this on consent?
Yes. That's a fair question. Franz, I seem to recall you being a part of that discussion. Okay, so seeing no further discussion from the board or hands in the public, we will take a vote on the motion from Liz to approve an outside consumption permit for the Heart Rose Club for the deck connected to the building located at 11 Green Street. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That will carry 5-0. Thank you very much, John. Okay, so we're going to move on to new business agenda item 9C, which is the EMS update. We'll invite Chief and AC here to the table. Welcome, gentlemen. So this is the monthly report from the fire department on EMS. I believe this is going to be our full year report, which is very exciting. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you. We've all reviewed the memo that you've provided in the backup material.
Yep. So thank you as usual. This is always that great opportunity for us to kind of talk about things that we've been doing. This month, I really wanted to kind of focus on one thing in particular, and that's a public appreciation to our staff. This year has been pretty remarkable in terms of the things that they've done. We've responded to about 4,500 emergencies. And through all of our talk with EMS, it's easy to forget that we also respond to fires, motor vehicle crashes, technical rescue events, hazmat incidents. Of those calls, over 3,000 of those calls involve a response with EMS. So it's pretty remarkable. Our staff has endured countless policy and procedure changes. They have increased EMS licensure, have sat through hundreds and hundreds of hours of training. We now have a partnership with Golden Cross and endured some hardship there and some growth as we learn to live with another organization within our walls. And our folks, our staff have really they've put in the work. They met every challenge with head on and continue to work through it. So we appreciate it. I know that the town is seeing it every day in the lives that they touch. So I thank my staff, and I'm sure the chief will add in parts of that as well. But in terms of the statistics and some of the data that's pulled from the year, during the month of June, we responded to 318 calls for service. Of those 318 calls, 245 calls required a response with an ambulance. In more detail, 202 rescue emergency medical services, 39 false alarms, 20 good intent calls, 44 calls of service, 7 hazardous conditions, 1 special type of incident, and 5 fire calls. For the year of fiscal year 2023, we responded to 3,051 EMS calls. Our average time of a call was 27 minutes and 45 seconds. The need to have 2 ambulances was 480 times. The need to have 3 ambulances, 58 times. And the need for mutual aid was 2 times. We transported a total of 2,044 patients. Our average response time was 4 minutes and 29 seconds. When we break that down to the 80th percentile time, it's 6 minutes and 50 seconds. It's for 90th percentile time, it's 8 minutes and 7 seconds. And the 90th percentile time for emergency response is 6 minutes and 25 seconds. Golden Cross invoiced out a total of $1,001,707.20. And they at this point have received $627,845.34.
Excellent. Thank you, Chief. I don't know if you had anything further. No? All right. Thank you very much, AC Cure, for the presentation. Board members, questions or comments on the EMS update? There's no motion here, I don't believe. No. So we're just, oh no, there is a motion. So I'll I'll take a motion now.
I'll make it.
Thank you, Daniel.
Find it. I move to accept the EMS update as presented.
Great, thank you. And now we'll move on to questions or comments. Franz.
Welcome, gentlemen. So in these response times, I realized that I'm not quite clear on whether there's a separate first response that, when somebody goes out separate from the ambulance. And if so, when that would happen. So there's no separate first response time to look at here.
No, the treatment starts immediately upon the arrival of our fire department unit. So whether that's an ambulance or a fire truck, that's when that treatment starts.
And in what proportion of cases does a fire truck go out before the ambulance, let's say?
Typically, the response out in West Brattleboro involves a fire truck prior to an ambulance. And that's been pretty standard practice as we've responded over the years.
But more closer to the downtown area, it would just be an ambulance with no fire truck, is that right?
If there's a need for a fire truck for additional resources, I won't say that there's never a need. If we go to some critical incidents, some patients, if it's a cardiac emergency or a need for additional lifting and stuff like that, you would get a response with the fire truck.
And that would be a decision that dispatch makes based on the call that comes into them?
That decision's made by the officer in charge.
So dispatch would notify the officer in charge of what the situation is, and then the officer would make the decision.
Yep. That happens through multiple avenues, but it happens through our dispatching app and through radio paging system.
Okay, it's a little more complicated than I envisioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Franz. Other board members? Daniel?
Yeah.
To the public.
I just want to echo the thanks that you kind of detailed in this memo. This is a culmination of 12 months of these reports, and the staff that did this work and did it in collaboration of staff that I'm really proud of and appreciative of. And I don't think they've probably heard that enough, honestly, from me and from the rest of this board. So thank you. Please just pass that along.
We will.
Yeah.
For all of us.
Yeah.
Other board members? Yeah, I'll just speak very briefly to echo Daniel's point. We're going to be talking even this evening about the future of EMS in Brattleboro. That's a question that the board is considering, but that doesn't have any impact on the work that has been done this last year, which has been incredible. I'm incredibly grateful to all the staff at Brattleboro Fire and our Golden Cross partners for the work this last year. And I agree with Daniel, it hasn't been echoed enough, and it's reflected in the numbers, it's reflected in the impact that it's had on everyday Brattleboro residents who are having their worst moment. So thank you very much. And I want to also thank the leadership at Fire for coming and taking lots of questions from the board and from the community over this last year. It's a really important issue, and I appreciate the grace that we've taken questions when we don't have an answer to them, coming back to the board and to the public to get those answers. And I know we're going to continue to answer those questions and to have that grace as we move into the question about EMS for the future of Brattleboro. So thank you. With that, I will move on to questions from the community. And I'm sure Bob Ozer's got a question. There he is. And I'll just make sure, let's see if there's any hand. Nope. And Bob, I want to welcome you to.
I'll identify myself.
Yes. Welcome to the select board meeting. It's great to see you here.
Hello, Ian. Hello, board. Bob Ozer, Brattleboro. First, I want to point out something that's not in the report. Well, it is in the report. It's in the backup material. But if people missed it, I think they should highlight it and commend the fire department. It's actually in the Public Works Department report, and it indicates that the fire department and several other agencies within the town helped out in clearing up and cleaning up some of the area where there was an encampment. And unfortunately, I was not available that day, but had done that before. And I can attest to the intricacy of doing something like that. So I wanted to point that out. And even though it wasn't in the EMS update. So we talked about staff, and that I heard the word hardship and I heard the word policy change. And there was some information recently that of the 16 personnel in the department that departed over the last, I think, 18 months or so, that 11 had been hired just within days, weeks, or months before their departure. So there were very short-termers, less than a year on the job, who had left the job. And that's concerning because there's a lot of expense and effort to go in onboarding someone. So what is going on there? And I thought there was an easy way to maybe get an answer to that. And that might be that if you have exit interviews of individuals from the department who have left, and you can certainly de-identify or redact any personnel information from those exit interviews, and look at the exit interviews for the reasons why people left. Someone who I had said that to said, well, maybe we should also encourage an honest and open discussion about holdovers, callbacks, and why so many people have left in the past 18 months. And I'm not even sure what the words holdovers and callbacks mean. So I think someone would need to explain that. I've spoken before and asked about overtime. And overtime is now, $227,000, I think, over budget. I don't know if I have that number right. I know in the estimates for the thing we'll discuss later, the transition, the estimate was $21,000 for the year. Certainly a lot different, almost a tenfold increase in what was actually spent. And so there are two sides to the overtime, right? Or maybe even three sides. One is the money. The other is, what does that mean in terms of burnout? And why does that number keep going up? And what does it mean there? Franz, I think, asked the question earlier about how a response occurs. And there was a
Bob,
question,
and I'm just going to ask you to wrap up.
this is the last one. That why there might be multiple vehicles responding to an incident. And the person who asked me that question, I happened to be observing this as it was happening. A ladder truck, a fire truck, an ambulance responded to what seemed to be a good intent call. So how much does that cost? How much does that call out with all those vehicles cost? And that's my final question.
Great. Thank you, Bob. Yeah, Chief.
First off, I want to respond to the article that was in the Vermont Digger yesterday because of those amount of people, 5 of those people left and went to work for either another Fire-EMS agency or an EMS agency. 3 left for personal reasons. 1 was a voluntary resignation. 1 retired. And 5 other members either opted out of their probationary or could not fulfill their probationary period. When we hire somebody, we have expectations, and if they can't meet the expectations of the Brattleboro Fire Department, then we either try to assist them with meeting those expectations, or we give them they make the option of, well, I guess I can't meet your expectations, and I need to move on. So that's why the personnel. Why they left. The 16th one that left was a part-time fire inspector, which the position has been filled. As of August 3rd, we will be full staffed at 28 people. It mentioned in there that we're advertising for help. We are. We have a hiring list, which is good for 1 year. We currently have 2 people on the hiring list. We advertised for positions to grow that list in the event that when we do have an opening, we have more of a opportunity to pick from a group of people to hire somebody. The overtime, I've answered this numerous times. One, it's because of FMLA. Two, it's because of vacations. Three, it's because when we hire somebody, they're not counted towards the shift count until they meet the expectations that they have to meet in order to count towards that shift count. So therefore, you have to hire people and fill those positions per our labor contract. As well as sick and other things and vacation times that come up. The call that you're referring to is you saw a ladder truck and an engine and an ambulance go to a call. When that call initially came in, we received it as somebody unconscious, not breathing. When that happens, we do roll what is at least 6 people to that incident. So you will see, depending on the staffing, you will see the ambulance and engine from Central Station, and you'll see the ladder truck, which comes out of Station 2 now, respond to that incident. Once it's determined whether its CPR is in progress, they'll keep responding to that incident. Or once they get there and determine that the person is breathing or conscious and it's not a cardiac arrest or CPR is in progress, then those units get released. So that's why you see those vehicles going to a call. And unfortunately, today with the environment that we have in town, those calls come in more frequently than they used to. So that's why you see that. I believe I answered your questions. If I didn't, please let me know and I'll answer.
All right. So I see Bob, but I'm just going to see if there's any other hands. I see Dick. Okay, Dick first, and then we'll hear back from Bob briefly. And then if there's other comments from the board, we're going to have our break a little late.
Okay, Dick DeGray. I've been asking this question for several months. I'm going to continue to ask it. We had 2,044 billable calls, correct, that you transported?
Mm-hmm.
That generated an invoice number of $1,107.20. To date, we have $67,845.34, which is roughly, again, around 63% collection rate. And I know that you had said it's going to take some time to get that.
Mm-hmm.
Further on in the discussion down the road, it looks like you're projecting revenue of $942,000 if we take this on. My calculation would be that you'd have to invoice, with this collection rate that we're at, you'd have to invoice roughly $1,250,000 to get to where you're going to be, which would mean an additional 800 calls, 900 calls to generate that revenue. Now, I know that the price of poker is going up with us if the town does take this over from what Golden Cross is building to what potentially we're going to build. But the bulk of our riders are Medicare, Medicaid, and I think the last meeting or the meeting before, we have a 12 or 14% private ride, which we're expecting to pay full freight. So I really, again, not your fault, but I really have a concern about your projections that we'll talk about in a few minutes.
I was going to say, we're going to probably get more to that.
Again, I raise this because it's part of this.
Yeah.
And when I looked at the invoice number, that number is not going to change. And I don't know how much the credits are going to change over the next month or two.
Okay. I think we can get to most of that when we're in the next agenda items. But we can, if you want to speak briefly to the delay in the reimbursement that's like multiple months, if I recall from the other times that we've answered this question, and that's still being reflected in this.
From other billing agencies that we've talked to during this process and talking with Dale, it's going to take 3 to 6 months before he actually collects his full reimbursement from this previous last 12, beyond the 12 months.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, and we can talk more about it, but I don't think getting into that right now is totally germane. Bob has a quick follow-up. We'll go back to the board.
So just to briefly clarify, with respect to the, especially the short-termers who left, it was really to look at the exit interview documents, that if the people who left were spoken with in terms of why they left, and a record was made of that, to de-identify those documents. The reasons for leaving are already available in the backup material. The issue about the ladder truck, the engine, and the ambulance responding to an incident, the question there was, what's the cost of that call? And saving the medical issue of whether it's an appropriate way of responding to a particular incident, but what's the cost of that response?
I can't give you that answer now, and it's no different than when we responded with rescue. When they had a cardiac arrest, we sent 2 vehicles to the cardiac arrest as well. So it's the same response, just different organizations. I can try to get you a cost, but when you have a cardiac arrest, it takes a minimum of 6 people to make it function properly, and that's a minimum.
Okay, board members, we've got a pending motion to accept the EMS report. Any additional questions or comments? Nope, I don't see any other hands. So in that case, if I can find it. So there's a motion to accept the EMS update as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
It's going to carry 5-0. So we went a little over, so we'll break for just about 5 minutes and we'll reconvene a little after 8:15. Great, thank you. We are going to reconvene the Brattleboro Select Board meeting. It's a little later than I thought it was going to be at a little after 8:20. We're going to move on to new business agenda item 9D, which is the Fire-EMS transition update. We've got multi-part, and we're going to start with the public engagement update, and I'm going to turn to John on that one.
Yep, thank you, Ian. We are still on schedule for the tasks that you approved at your May meeting on the Fire-EMS transition project. For public engagement, that continues, and tonight is the 4th major opportunity for public feedback on this project. The dedicated project website at www.brattleboro.org/EMS project has been kept up to date and has received over 1,300 page views, a 72% increase since June. We also had a decided uptick in email feedback sent to emsfeedback@brattleboro.org. All of that input will be summarized for the Select Board prior to your deliberations in September. So I guess first I would ask if there are any questions or suggestions on our public engagement approach.
And there's no motion here, it's just discussion, so. Franz.
I think it could maybe be just a little bit easier to link to the presentations that Patrick has given us. I know that that's there. I was just thinking it could be a little bit more visible for people who are looking for that.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I think bouncing off of Dora's point from public participation, can we just make sure that the downloadable content from the EMS landing page is easy to read and access and print out if needs to be formatted? That would be good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions, board? I'll turn over to the public once I see any. Okay. Don't see any hands in the room. I see one, Dora.
I didn't know you were ready. So we're addressing the specific issue of citizen participation, right, in this question.
Correct.
I still think that there are more ways to reach out to the public. I always found when I was on the select board, the best way to reach out to the public was actually walk up and down Main Street and talk to the business owners and the people down there, because most of them don't pay attention and don't have time to interact. And so there's got to be some sort of more than just the online thing and the select board meetings. And hopefully, John, I know you're really interested in the idea of citizen participation. This time of year, I mentioned this at the last meeting, it's really hard to get people to pay attention because they've got lots of things going on. But there more avenues, more sources of media would really, really engage folks more.
Great. Thank you very much, Dora. I don't see any other hands, so not any other hands from the board. The one thing I just wanted to clarify was we will be having an in-person public meeting in September,
Yes.
correct, prior to the select board meeting, the first select board meeting or the second select board meeting in September.
Yes, I was going to mention that. So sometime between your two meetings in September, which I think are the 5th and the 19th. So somewhere in between those two, we will do a public forum that will invite anyone from the community to come to. And you know, at that point, we'll know kind of what the options are.
Yeah.
So that will be a good chance to hear from a broader cross-section at the community as well.
And obviously, we'll do a better job of knowing the date. And
Oh, yeah, it hasn't been set.
We haven't set a date to it yet. Dora, I see your hand. If you wanted a brief follow-up.
It is a follow-up to that. I just want to highly recommend utilizing one of the schools for that meeting. The select board, the town hall is not a good place to draw people into. It never has been. And there aren't a lot of public meeting spaces. Maybe the library might be another option that are, because there are certain places that more people, more diverse groups of people feel welcome in. And the town hall just is not one of them.
I had been envisioning, just entirely on my own here, but I had been envisioning it at the library just because I've been at public engagement things there that have been really successful. So that's kind of what I was thinking. It's not my call, but I think I hear that, and I don't think we were, partially because this room can't really hold that many people, so it's functionally not really sufficient for something like that anyways. So, but hear ya, appreciate the comment. Okay, so I don't see any other hands, so we'll just move on to the next.
Next, Assistant Town Manager Patrick Moreland will take us through the next installment of exploring the fully municipal EMS option before returning to me to do an update on the contracted EMS approach.
Great. So we're going to turn it over to Patrick for another one of his slideshow presentations.
So give me just a second to get this up and running. Oh, I always figure out how I do this full screen. Boom. Okay. So good evening, everybody. I'll be making another, presentation as I have a couple of times throughout this process. I just would like to say that these presentations are a team effort, that this is not just Patrick working on this, but we're working as a sort of interdisciplinary team. John, myself, Chief Howard, AC Keir, Kim Frost, and others as needed. We all put this together. I'm presenting it to you this evening, but this is certainly a team effort. So that particular team set about some time ago to try and ascertain what would be the ideal operating model for the town of Brattleboro if the board was to choose a municipal EMS program. And we honed in really on two key components that we should be looking at. One is our ability to respond to multiple simultaneous emergencies, often referred to as our effective response force, and then also we needed to be fiscally responsible. So we were looking for an operating model that would have the least impact on the general fund. Taking a look at these in a little more detail, the board set a goal back in March of this year that we ought to be able to have the opportunity to send as many as 6 firefighters to a working fire at the same time when there were 2 medical emergencies that each had 2 staff going to them. So what that defines for us is our minimum platoon size needs to be 10. That doesn't guarantee we're always going to be able to send 6 to a fire. Somebody could be on vacation, somebody could be sick, et cetera. But it requires a minimum platoon size of 10 in order to be able to have that option. So that's our sort of first criteria. The second is we recognize that if we were to develop a municipal EMS system, certain expenses would come into the general fund, as would certain revenues. So what would be the net impact to that general fund? We examined a number of different options, and they varied greatly. We first looked and explored the option of what if we had 4 platoons instead of 3? We looked at 4 platoons of 8, which was fiscally responsible but didn't address the effective response force. 4 platoons of 10 was a little different. It certainly met that, but then it became not responsible financially. 3 platoons of 11 was the same, and where we landed was on 3 platoons of 10 plus an EMS supervisor. Now, the 3 platoons of 10, like I say, this meets our platoon size. We have determined that it has the least impact to the general fund. And moreover, we think the EMS supervisor position is really key to the success, the long-term success of a program. The EMS supervisor would be the primary liaison to the hospital, Brattleboro Memorial. It'd be the primary liaison to EMS District 13. They would facilitate internal and external training, coordinate quality assurance and quality improvement programs, and make sure that all the certifications and things are maintained amongst all of our staff and all of the equipment we use. So we think that's really a key component to the structure of a new program. So, oops, I need to move this, let's say over there. So then let's take a look at the cost analysis. Where would I put that? Put this somewhere where it's kind of out of the way. Let's put it there for now. Let's take a look at the cost analysis. And what we've shown here is actually 2 different revenue estimates. The first estimate is based on the work that Golden Cross has been doing. We see that within the 12 months of their first year with us, they actually collected $627,845. We recognize that there's at least a 3-month lag in terms of collections. So this really represents more like 9 months revenue for Golden Cross. And if we annualize that, we see that it adds up to about $837,000. So that's the first column. The second column is based on the estimating work that we demonstrated to the board. I believe it was in May. It may have been June, excuse me. And so this is a slightly different number than was shown to you back in June. It's a little less. I believe that was 970,000. This is 940,000. And the difference here is at the time in June, we were using an estimated number of transports in a given year. And so what we did is we took 6 months transport and doubled them, right? We've been able to take a look at that post June 30th and recognize that our actual number, at least for the 1 year that we have this data, was, I believe it was 2,043. And so we've been able to readjust the volume of transports, and that's resulted in the new revenue number of 942. So from there, we can start to take a look at different expenditures. The top section of this chart shows staffing expenditures. The EMS supervisor, these are going to be the same, by the way, on both columns all the way down. We have the EMS supervisor in there keyed to the same pay rate as a captain who is also an AEMT. We think that this is an important position and have positioned it would plan to position it like that if we were to move forward. We put in 6 firefighter EMTs. And between these 7 positions, that would bring us to the 10 plus an EMS supervisor. So that adds $342,000 with benefits. That's an additional $264,000. A certain amount of overtime would certainly be likely to occur with new staff. We're also hoping with the additional staff, we might see a reduction in overtime. We've currently keyed that in at 5%. And together, those costs add up to about $717,000 for additional staffing. Now, you might look at this and say, what about billing? Billing is certainly a cost. It isn't necessarily a staffing cost. It could be a, once again, I gotta move this little thing. Let me put it up there. We could use a third party. We've met with some third party billings, and they will, for a certain percentage of the revenue collected, provide that service for us, and that's something we could consider. We also recognize that between fiscal 24 and fiscal 25, and actually beginning back in fiscal 23, there's been some shifting of responsibilities within the finance department, particularly around issues of payroll. As you can see here in fiscal 24, there are 6 full-time positions in the finance department, and we could easily move into fiscal 25 with that same 6 plus an EMS billing position. And the way that this might occur is in fiscal 24, you see the accounts payable and the treasury clerk, that's an accounts receivable person, has 2 FTEs. And in fiscal 25, we plan on having that be 1 FTE. So there's some capacity there to be able to take on EMS billing within the finance department without having to add a new expense to the general fund. It doesn't necessarily commit us to doing it in-house or out-of-house or even doing a municipal system, only that we could add that function without adding a new cost to the general fund. So moving back to the expenditures, get that over here. New vehicles are going to need new fuel. So we've added 2,500. There is currently $10,000 in the fire department budget for medical supplies. We think that needs to be closer to 25,000. So we would add 15,000. Vehicle maintenance, 7,500. Insurance. This is 2 different types of insurance. This is both insuring the vehicle and the workers' comp associated with the salaries noted above. Biological waste at $1,000. There's a Vermont provider assessment that would add another 31,000. Oxygen replenishing would be an additional 1,000. And then capital equipment replacement. I'd like to take a quick dive elsewhere with that. We mentioned to the board at the startup cost discussion last month, there would need to be portable radios. Those are the radios that people wear on their person. There would need to be mobile radios. Those are radios that go in vehicles. And there would need to be ambulances. We're currently showing $600,000 being spent on ambulances. That's not a commitment to any particular ambulance. In fact, we recognize that for every additional $100,000 you spend on ambulances, these numbers would rise by $18,042. We have planned for each of these expenses to go up 5% a year. And so while the initial cost is one thing, the replacement cost is something altogether different, and we're preparing for that with this particular schedule. But this can be adjusted based on future decisions the board makes about startup expenditures. So we add the capital replacement cost, and then if we were to move forward in this manner, we would no longer require the services of Golden Cross. We would eliminate that contract. The net impact of that series of expenditures is about $110,000. You would add that to the staffing expenditures of $717, and you arrive at $828,000. So the impact in fiscal '25 to the general fund would be some measure of limited savings depending upon how much revenue comes in, which is dependent in part on future decisions the board would need to make about billing rates, collection practices, et cetera. But somewhere between a small savings and a modest savings. So the question next becomes, are you suggesting that EMS is profitable? And the answer to that is absolutely not. Haven't, won't, and it just isn't. The figures presented don't fully express Brattleboro's liability for EMS expenditures. There are many EMS costs that are sunk into existing fire department employee salaries, benefits, and capital equipment replacement budgets. Instead, what these numbers show is that the new expenses, the ones that we would take on if we were to make this decision, would have a positive impact on the general fund in fiscal '25, meaning we wouldn't need to raise taxes. But looking ahead, there are future years. Staffing and other supplies are naturally going to go up. They're going to increase every year. If we are to maintain viability, staff and the select board would need to closely monitor revenues, expenditures, and make adjustments so as to keep the program viable. Staff also thinks it would be worthwhile to explore other sources of revenue. Certainly, AP Triton identified a couple of options, a non-transport fee, potentially a subscription model. There's pros and cons to doing any of those. Certainly the board can review and consider those at the appropriate time, but there are other potential sources of revenue that could be available to us. And I think it's important to remember that cost increases and things of that nature, those are going to be borne by the town one way or the other. Whether there's going to be a municipal EMS program or a third party, those costs will eventually find their way to us, either in a contract or in wage increases and natural increases in the general fund. So with that.
Great. Thank you very much, Patrick, for the presentation. So we're going to take questions, comments from the board first, and we'll go to the public. So board. And we can direct Patrick to go back to the presentation if we need to go to particular slides. So questions, comments, clarifications. Franz, is that a hand? No?
Yeah, but I don't have to go
Daniel's
first.
hand first.
I mean, doesn't have to be me. I'm just really happy, Patrick, that you pointed out there's still a number of policy decisions yet to be made that would impact these numbers. There are policy decisions that would impact startup costs. And so I guess I'm really grateful of all of the hard work that's gone into this process over this summer. And I feel like with this presentation, we have three decent bodies of work, related to startup, revenue, and operating costs. And you can put those three together now, and you can see that based on your analysis, it seems like this is a possibility, right? There are policy decisions about whether the town wants to spend some number of millions of dollars on startup expenses. There are policy decisions about, how much we'd like to set rates at to set revenue at an appropriate level and, what kinds of ambulances to buy and how much that would all cost. But I think that, having all of this information out here is helpful. And I would really just urge my fellow board members to be open-minded and in the next sort of month, 6 weeks, be really alive to those policy decisions and not just kind of go along with the assumptions that are baked into those three presentations. And I'm not saying they're bad assumptions. I'm just saying there's decision making, even if we were to go down this route, it doesn't have to be these particular assumptions. And so I just want to say thank you to the team who developed it, and let's keep thinking about it.
Thank you, Daniel. Other board members? Franz?
Sure. Thank you, Patrick. I think that's very clear, and the way it's presented makes it usable, and what Daniel's saying, that we need to have open minds and make decisions, et cetera. So this is very helpful. There's one thing where I continue to think that we could do a more accurate accounting, and that's something that we discussed previously, which is that if we don't have to do the billing, which is to say if we did contract with a third party to provide services and that third party did the billing, then under your model, we could actually decrease the size of the finance department by one staff member. And so that would be reflected in the general fund as a savings not seen in anywhere in EMS, but a savings to the general fund, so that comparing the municipal setup with a contracted setup, I think there's it's more accurate to include that in our thinking, that in that sense, the town staff doesn't stay at the same size depending on which model we choose from, because it would stay at the same size it is now, but it wouldn't be at the size that it could go to if we were able to shed a staff member whose services we just didn't need anymore. So I just want to include that slight adjustment in, at least in my thinking about what the numbers add up to.
I think that's totally fair, and I think it's reasonable for everyone. The select board and the public included to make sure that when we're evaluating, all right, so here's a municipal option and here's a contracted option, that factors like that are made clear and identified. That's something that we anticipate presenting in September.
Okay, well, great. That's really all I have to add at this point. And I think, each of us needs to go over these numbers in sufficient detail and probably more than once to really understand the financial implications of a decision we're going to make. So thank you for presenting them to us.
Thanks, Franz. Peter?
Yeah, I think one thing I know that we, the six of us, but five of us mainly, sitting up here, have a whole lot more time to digest a lot of this information than somebody sitting at home or somebody sitting in the audience here. And I just want to make clear, because I know sometimes when I'm out on the street and people assume that after one of these presentations that this is the direction in which we're going, I just really want to emphasize at this point that this is one of the options that as we go through these gyrations that we could consider, not are considering that, but that could come into play. And I know all of my fellow select board people here have heard me say this is one of these things where it's better to have a plan and not need it than need a plan and not have it. So I want to just put that in, that this is just an option that we are looking at. This is not a final decision. We have a long way to go.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I appreciate that. And I have tried to mention this at the beginning when we have this agenda item, but I think I failed to this time, that, we're doing this is a discussion on a multi-track model where the town is considering either, municipal EMS or a third-party contracted EMS. And we kind of have updates each month that are all sort of laid out in a project calendar. And this is, we're in the discussion about the municipal EMS element of this project plan. And that next item in the agenda is discussing the third party. So yeah, none of it's set in stone or anything like that. It's just a discussion as we move through this to ultimately September, where the board will make a decision. Once we have all of the information from both tracks.
But again, just an option, part of the, kind of just opening it all up to everybody so that we're completely transparent in this process.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Other board members? Liz, I don't know if you had any comments or.
Present.
Oh, good. Great. Okay. Well, I'll open up to the public for comments. I'm going to give Kate first go.
Oh, man, it's going to be Dick. That's my goal.
Kate O'Connor, Brattleboro. First, thank you for the presentation. And I want to thank you for acknowledging that there are EMS expenses under the fire department line item, in addition to the added expenses. That's one of the big bugaboos that I've had, and I appreciate you saying that. I also appreciate you acknowledging that expenses are going to go up. Saying that, though, I want to drill down on the final slide 23.
Let's give us a second to bring it up.
Yep, it's page 23.
Oh, page
Well, it's 20.
Slide 23.
I'm sorry.
When you start page numbers, that's a little different.
No, they didn't get captured on the.
They weren't paginated? My
goodness.
Oh, it actually was. There's a little page number right up at the top.
Oh, good.
Oh, it is, for those following along at home, it's page 109 of 303. Is that right? No.
I don't know. It's hard. It's hidden behind the word town. Looks like this.
It's this one. Come on.
Cost analysis?
Oh, it is.
Cost analysis 10.
108?
Page 20. Slide-
Wait,
No, no,
16?
This guy here.
Keep going, 23.
Oh, 20.
Slide number 23.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, for some reason, it is not being
Okay.
very kind. Give me just a second, Kate.
Yeah, it's slide 108. Thank you. Someone in the audience had it. Sorry, Kate,
Okay.
go ahead.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
And I appreciate what you're doing here. And this, I want to make clear, and I just want to clarify and drill down, that this is not a cost analysis for year one of operations. This is year one's impact on the general fund. What's missing from this, if you look under staffing, the expenses are $717,307. Other, if you look down, it's not added up. So if you add between fuel and capital replacement, that's an expenditure of $235,978. So the total, if you subtotaled it before you took out the ambulance cost, the $717,000 plus $235,000 equals $953,285, which is the year one FY25 expenditures in the added expense. If you then, when you take out the 125 for the ambulance, is when you get the 828,285. Do you see what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I just want everyone to understand that that's great for fiscal year 25, because you already have you're assuming that the ambulance cost is baked in. But when you get to year two, FY26, based on this estimate, you're going to be building the FY26 budget on $953,285. Does that make sense? Because those are the expense. All of this stuff that adds up to $953,000 is actual checks the town is going to write. The town is not going to write $882,000 worth of checks, because that doesn't pay for all of those things on that list. Franz is looking at me like I'm crazy. But what I'm trying to say is all of those things that are under added expenses without the EMS contract subtracted out adds up to $953,000. And if you look at your town estimate on what you're going to raise, your revenue is $942,000. So you've bumped up already against what you're anticipating your revenues are going to be. So, and Patrick just laid out, ambulance replacement costs are going to go up each year. Salaries are going to go up each year. So under this model with these figures, and I'm being generous to say that the town estimate of $942,000 worth of revenue is the one you use, you've already bumped up to your level. Your expenses are already exceeding what you think your total your revenue estimates are going to be. So you bet if you pick this, you folks got to be ready right now to figure out how you're going to close that gap, because you're going to see the gap in FY 26, 27, 28, 29. So I just want to make that really clear. I think the public needs to understand it. I think the board needs to understand it. I want the news media to understand it and not use that 828,285 figure as what the added revenue expense totals. It doesn't. It totals $935,285. And that is the figure that you're going to be basing the FY26 budget off of. If I'm making clear, I want to make sure everybody understands what I'm saying.
Are you confused by it?
No, and I'm not looking at you like you're crazy. That's not my intention. What I'm thinking is, boy, I really need these numbers written down in front of me, because just to hear them recited, I can't slot them into the right place.
Well, what I would love is if this is posted again, that it can be subtotaled and you have the $935,000 and then you add back in the 125 and get the 828, because no one in the public is going to understand that that is not the number for the expenses in under added revenue for FY25. That is not it. It's $935,000.
I hear what you're saying. I'm just saying that until I see the numbers written down, it's very hard for me.
All you got to do is add them up. And what I'm hoping is that this can be edited or fixed so you have a subtotal. And then in documents moving forward, when we're going through other meetings, when you're going to lay out what the startup costs are, 1 point whatever million.
Yeah.
You're going to say what our anticipated revenue is going to be, and you're probably using 942. I'm hoping that for year one, added expenses, and I say added because we know there are more expenses that are already in the budget, added expenses that you use $953,285, because that's what those expenses add up to. And that's what people are going to see in the budget, in the line item of the budget. It's going to say 953,000, so I just really, really, really want everybody to understand it. And that because 828 is not what the added expenses are in real time, real money. You're at the supermarket scanning your stuff. It's going to add up to $953,000. Then you got the coupon and it goes down to 828. But I don't mean to keep going, but I believe this is a really important point.
Yeah.
And then I want to say one other thing that I always say, this is really great to see facts and figures, but I think it'd be really great to have other EMS providers from municipalities come and really talk to us about this so we can figure out what they do.
Great.
So thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. Daniel had his hand up and wanted to respond briefly.
Yeah, I guess. And then if somebody else wants to correct me, because, I'm not a finance director or a mathematician, but as you were speaking, Kate, I was like, wow, this is really compelling. What you're saying made a lot of sense to me. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, no, that number underrepresents. I'm not going to say misrepresents, because I know that the intent of this work was to show the impact of the general fund. However, as I was listening to you and thinking about it, I was like, well, wait a second. No, because every year, if we don't provide this service ourselves, we contract with somebody else. And every year we pay them a certain sum of money. And so if we do this ourselves, then we will no longer pay that money, which is a net saving to the general fund. So it's got to be reflected someplace.
And you could argue that by using the Golden Cross number, we're actually using the lowest contracting number that we could to. But yeah, I mean, I that was the point I was going to make, because if we don't provide it as a municipal service, we're going to need to provide it through a contracted service, and that contract cost is somewhere.
Yeah.
Franz, is that a hand?
Well, just that I'm still in the dark as to where Kate's numbers come from, and I need to see them all written down someplace.
Comes right here.
Oh, and just, and
Right here, then right in the
and
bottom.
okay, oh, wait, we got way too many people talking. So just to speak to the subtotals, totally. We'll subtotal them.
Yeah.
We'll subtotal them. The only thing I was going to correct in your terminology was I don't really think it's fixing it. I think it's update or improving on how we can present the numbers, which revising it. I think we want that. We're looking for that from feedback. So I really appreciate it. But I also appreciate that Patrick and the team are putting a lot of work into trying to present this in the clearest way possible. So additional feedback is really appreciated.
So
John has his hand up.
Oh, no.
So
And I see Liz.
Kate, you're not actually changing any of the numbers on the page. You're just saying they should be added up in a slightly different way that to you reflects reality better. Okay, thank you.
Liz?
I just want to reiterate Daniel's point in Kate's language, and that is we would get a coupon every year.
Okay, so I saw Dick's hand, but I've got Judy's hand in Zoom, which I'm going to go first. Unless, Peter, did you have a comment?
Yeah,
Sorry, Judy, we're going to hold on one second.
I'm sorry, Judy. So I see exactly, and I think to Kate's point is she's right. These checks will need to be physically written, but I kind of liken it a little bit to buying a car. Sticker price is $10,000. The value of my car is $2,000, and I negotiate my price and it comes down. So I guess all of these expenses will come out of the general fund. The one expense that does not come out of the general fund, or that comes out of the general fund, we don't have to pay. And I think, so we are looking to reapply that back, no? I mean, that, at least that's how I sort of understand it, and that's how we come down to the number that's on Patrick's form. Right? I hear what Kate's saying, and I don't think she's incorrect. But I think at some point in time, if we don't have to write a check, that should count as well.
Right.
Okay.
Correct. Other board comments before? No? Okay, Judy.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I guess I'm reiterating somewhat of what Kate was saying, because when I looked at the other expense, the added revenue, the staff, and then the expenses, the staffing and the other, I was really confused by the item of eliminating the EMS contract, because naturally that will be eliminated if we are having a municipal ambulance services and we're paying 1.9 million for ambulances and other expenses. So I don't understand why eliminating that EMS contract for Golden Cross would come under the operating expenses of our own municipal center ambulance transport. So I think it's very confusing to see this eliminate the Golden Cross contract as part of the cost analysis of operating expenses for a municipal ambulance transport services. So I would suggest that we take out that eliminate EMS contract and just assume that, of course, we'll save that $125,000 because we're spending 1.9 million for our own ambulances, never mind these extra costs. So I don't quite understand why that's even in there. So I guess and it certainly wouldn't be in there in the years after. Maybe this first year, if that's already in the budget for 2024. But I just think it's very confusing to the public, and the real operating costs of our own municipal ambulance service is going to be, the 952 on an ongoing basis. So I would just agree with Kate that that's confusing about what the real expenses are, because we won't have Golden Cross anymore if we're paying all this money for ambulances. So that is my comment.
Great. Thank you, Judy. I've got multiple select board members. I think Daniel had his hand up first and then Liz.
Yeah, I think that there's an issue with language here that's got confusing, because I'm pretty certain that what the intent of this kind of presentation was to show the net impact to the general fund, because for this select board member, one of the ways to judge at least the fiscal kind of viability of this project is how does the net impact on the general fund compare to previous contracts? Okay, so like we used to pay contracts to different providers, they cost a certain number of dollars. If we did it on our own, does the net impact cost more than those contracts, less, how much more, how much less? Like that's how I've been thinking about it for myself. And so I think that the attempt with this body of work here, I guess I'm still speaking to Judy, is like to show how providing the services within the municipality entirely would compare to the cost of a contract elsewhere. And so you kind of have to show the, I don't know, it's not really revenue, but it's an avoided expense, right? And so that avoided expense has an impact on the general fund, on the net of the general fund. And so I think maybe by portraying these expenses as like operating expenses, it doesn't, that avoided expense does seem confusing within that context. But I understand that the impact to the general fund is really what's being attempted to be shown here.
Liz, and then I think we should also just ask Patrick if he could just speak to why town staff included this in the presentation. But
Yeah, so my comment is merely that it needs to be accounted for, and that this is not the annual budget, this is an analysis. So in order to have the correct analysis, for example, Kate brought up the fact that supplies, that there's a certain amount of supplies already in our operating budget, but that we're adding to that number. So in the same way that we're talking about supplies, we're accounting for the fact that in this example, we would no longer have an EMS contract. And I think it's relevant and fair to present it in this way. You may want to have the subtotal as you described, but that elimination of the EMS contract is a very valid point of information.
Great. Patrick, do you mind speaking to it briefly?
I don't think I could improve upon what Liz just said.
Okay. Oh, no, you know what? It's just sort of, it must sometimes be frustrating to listen to us sort of opine on something where you were the one who, and your team did this work. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to it.
I think, no.
Okay. Do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I've got a couple other points, but I don't want
Hear from, we're going to keep it the public or?
well, they don't address the discussion we've just been having.
Okay.
So there's a couple other things I'd like to interject at some point.
All right. So I think it was Dick and then Dora. And then I don't have any other hands on Zoom, so.
Lester's going last. Dick DeGray, Brattleboro. Couple of things. One quickly on your point, Liz. Talked about adding $15,000 into the supply budget to $10,000 that's already there. So in 2025, that line item's going to be $25,000 or higher. So that kind of puts that argument to rest. Something earlier on that I was talking about is revenue. For the life of me, and I asked this before, now the chief said we're running 3 months behind, okay? So why haven't you, and I've asked you for this, go back and say, what is our collection rate in July, August, and September? And if we don't have money paid in to Golden Cross from July yet, we're not getting it. And so to get a better collection rate, I don't know why you didn't use the hard numbers from earlier in the year that would give you a better analysis of money that potentially is going to come in. And I've asked you to do that, and you haven't done that. And I'm wondering if you can answer that question, why you haven't done that. That's not to you. That's to John or the finance director or Patrick. Which one of you wants to answer that?
Yeah, do you want to ask your other questions and then we can take them on?
Well, I'll get back up. I really want to hear the answer to that because I'm really concerned, like Kate said, the real number. I mean, you can say you get a coupon every year, but you don't. You get the coupon one time and one time only. And so I'm going, okay, if this is the real cost and then this is what you're projecting for revenue, I have a real concern. You wouldn't open up a business spending $942,000 to make $110,000.
So do we want to speak to, again, how we generated the proposed?
Patrick already explained that, but maybe we could pull that slide back up again and talk through it again.
Yeah, I think it's an important issue. And I would just remind the public and the board that the 942 number is one proposed, after being modified based on full numbers for the year, is one proposed possible revenue from the presentation of revenues. There were multiple. So that's also something to keep in mind, that was like, there was a mix of payer rates, and we sort of identified one that seemed like a conservative, realistic estimate. So that these numbers are based on analysis and estimates, and they're not hard numbers. But Patrick, if you want to speak to, I think Dick is specifically on the Golden Cross question for that projected revenue or reimbursement.
So I can reiterate this. I don't know if it's fully responsive to Dick's question, but we agree that there's at least a 3-month delay in collecting reimbursement revenue from all the various different sources. We know that Golden Cross brought in $627,845 within the 12-month period, and what we believe, because of that 3-month delay, there was very little that came in July, very little that came in August. It started to trickle up a little bit in September. By October, you started to see a regular and reliable source of revenue coming in. So if we recognize that as being likely 75% of what they're likely to collect for the services that they delivered within that 12-month period, we would divide that number, $627,845, by 75%. That leads to $837,127. So that's what we anticipate Golden Cross is going to capture for the work that they provided within that 12-month period. Now, the revenue that they receive is dependent in large part on what they choose to bill, right? And if the town was to pursue a municipal system, there would need to be a discussion at some point about how much should we bill? What should we charge for our services? We know that Golden Cross is down at the lowest end of the spectrum. And we know from talking to the folks at AP Triton that something north of $1,000, possibly $1,400 would avoid leaving money on the table, particularly with private health insurance. Though it's not a very large percentage of our payer mix, it is a viable percentage of the payer mix. Much of our payer mix is Medicaid and Medicare. The nice thing about those is that they're reliable. The town estimate was based on a much larger billing rate of $1,400. That could be an average or could be a flat fee. It depends entirely how the board chooses to pursue it. But that number, run through the calculations of the revenue, the spreadsheet for which is actually on the town website, if anyone wants to dive in and check it out. And it has, I have, at least in the production of this number for 942, incorporated the actual number of transports that took place within that 12-month period of time rather than the estimated that we used back in June.
Daniel, thank you very much, Patrick.
I wonder if there's a different way of thinking about this, Dick, because you're sort of speaking to bills from last July as if, like, I don't know, we're still waiting on somebody who's just not gotten around to paying a bill from last July. But like, here we are in July 23, and what about the bills from May of 23, June of 23? And, we don't have those monies, well, we don't have them, period. But Golden Cross will almost certainly not have most of that money collected at this point, right? So and I might be wrong, right? And there's other people in this room who know a lot more about this than I do, so please correct me. But I see it as like a rolling lag, right?
Yes.
You know, there's always going to be a delay in services provided, the bill goes out, insurances do whatever they do with that bill, the person then pays some amount or the insurance pays some amount. You know, there's going to be lag time in all of that. So what we've got is like real-time revenue information from Golden Cross, but there's always going to be a lag. And so our model predicts what we might reasonably expect over 12 months of fully collected stuff. But it's like, it's going to have to be a roll in 12 months. You know, and the model is based on who our payer mix is, what the reimbursement rates are, the likely percentage of ALS versus BLS calls, and then it arrives at a number. You know, and it's a model, you know, so it's going to be off somewhat, but I think the methodology for the model is sound.
Franz?
Yeah, these are estimates. Your way of estimating it sounds reasonable, kind of quick and dirty, I'd say, but, you know, not unreasonable to look at those data. This is a little bit more sophisticated estimate, I would say, that incorporates some of the other variables that would not be included in using your 3-month estimate. Time variables, billing variables, collection variables, all of which Patrick has done a reasonable job of incorporating into his estimate. So I'm quite happy to take Patrick's estimate because it's an estimate. We don't know the answer. We can't know the answer. And we're going to do the best we can in making a prediction of what the future might hold. But going with one estimate over the other doesn't really add that much, I don't think.
I think if we can just focus on the fact of all this data, and correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, has been extrapolated over the last year of what we physically know, because that's all the information we have to go by. It's just the last 12 months with Golden Cross. So that's where these estimates are coming from, correct?
Correct.
I just wanted to point that out. And again, I just want to point out that what we are discussing is an option, not a rule, not a decision, just an option. Because I think sometimes these conversations get waylaid and get immersed in the numbers, and then people think like this is a decision we're making tonight. It is not.
Can I just request that we just run the number by Dale at Golden Cross and make sure
To do what?
can we just run the number by Dale at Golden
I'm sure
Cross?
they already have.
The projected annual revenue or reimbursement rate, if we haven't already, to just see his thoughts on it?
Sure.
Great. And if we can have that brought back to the board, we have multiple times to, you know, consider this. We have time before September, so. Yeah?
I'll certainly reach out to Dale and see what they can offer.
Okay. I've lost track of, do we have another, I know we got Dora. I just wanted to make sure there's no other board member who
I'm
wants to
good.
speak
I
on this.
think Liz
Okay.
had something to say.
Yes, Liz.
I just want to reiterate that this is a cost analysis, and this analysis is inherent in this comparison, and that's why eliminating the EMS contract needs to be included into this analysis.
I agree.
Dora.
Dora Bubalis. First, just to address Dick's point, I don't understand why you can't do both. It's like, okay, so you do the model. Like, why can't we get an exact accounting for a quarter for last year? Because if we don't have an exact counting for a year ago, then he's right. You're not getting that money. There's been a lot of talk about the different insurances that are involved. And we keep thinking of it as sort of 4 groupings: Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance, and no insurance. But there is a 5th grouping, which is probably the majority of the private health insurance. Those are the people that are eligible for subsidized health insurance. The question is, if someone is eligible for subsidized health insurance, is that health insurance paying any more than what Medicare or Medicaid paying? And are those people going to be required to pay the additional cost? Because I think the answer to those are both no, but I don't know. And I don't think anybody has even looked into this, because the top level for being eligible for subsidized health insurance is a household income of $54,999. And what was the most recent figure for average income in Brattleboro? 56, 58,000, somewhere in that range.
I think you're a little high, but
it might even be lower. So and of those folks, the majority probably fall. We're talking about people who are over 26 and under 65, who are probably making an income between 25 and 35,000. And because that top level is really, really distorted by the small percentage of people who make a very high income. So, and I'm not sure if anyone has actually looked into that or accounted for it, because it's something that needs to be looked at if we're talking about charging more. And so then you're talking about really only charging more to a small percentage of people who are on private health insurance that don't qualify for subsidized health insurance.
thank you very much, Dora. Daniel, and Liz. Daniel had his hand up first.
Yeah. A couple of things. I actually really appreciate your last point, and it's a thing that I've been kind of banging on about a little bit, that the rate, so going back to what I said before, there's so many policy decisions yet to be made if we were to go down this route. But one policy decision is, what's an appropriate rate? Should the rate be the same for ALS and BLS calls, et cetera, et cetera? And the big reason why that conversation needs to happen is because the people that would be most impacted by that decision are those with private insurance. So I have an MVP plan through my job. I didn't get any choice about it. Well, I did. I got 3 choices. They were all bad. And I will pay what I have to pay if I'm unlucky enough to need an ambulance ride. But I want to check in, I suppose, that like when the analysis of the payer mix was done, because you remember, this is not an analysis of what insurances are held in Brattleboro. Yeah. It's an analysis of what insurances were held by the people that needed an ambulance ride. And that private insurance number, which is 13% of the payer mix on my document, I would assume that includes people who have Blue Cross and MVP plans that were, either got from employers privately or through the healthcare marketplace. I used to be a healthcare assistant, so I know a little bit about that. And all those plans are Blue Cross and MVP plans. They're a little different, each one, but they're going to cover ambulance rides in a fairly comparable way. And so the question would be...
We'll get back. We've got other hands.
The question would be, when Triton did the study of the payer mix, does that private insurance number account for people with differently derived MVP and Blue Cross plans? I guess there are other insurers, but those are the names.
And then Liz, did you have it? Okay. Bob.
This one? So we get to the same place.
So Bob Ozer, and the more I sit down, the more I come up with more questions. But maybe a simple way to look at this, maybe it's gotten too complex, and maybe we need to simplify things. And one thing that I was thinking about in terms of simplifying was, what does it cost to have an effective fire response team? Period. Number. No EMS component. An effective fire response team. Then, what are all the EMS costs? All the ones that are sunk in the general fund, all the ones that we've enumerated, add all those up. You got 2 numbers. You can look at them. Separate budget items, really. Okay? Number 2, we are doing estimates. These are estimates. There's no question about that. And it's an analysis. So one of the things that's always asked with an estimate is, what's your confidence ratio for the analysis? What percentage? Someone said, maybe we should have Dale look at the numbers. Have anybody in EMS in Vermont look at the numbers? You know, that's an idea. We talked a little bit about the different plans, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, MVP. I think I sent some information to administration earlier this year on Medicare Advantage. And I was blown away by their special rule on ambulances. I think in our estimate, we only say 10% on Medicare Advantage. Statewide, it's growing to be 25%, because there are inducements to sign up for Medicare Advantage. And they have a special rule. If you can get there some other way, we're not paying the ambulance. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Bob. Dora, you had a follow-up response?
Well, I just wanted to say that the point I was trying to make is not just about private health insurance. Yes, that percentage of people has private health insurance. But there is a difference between the people who qualify for very much subsidized health insurance and the people who are paying almost full price. I think is probably seen differently by the health insurance company as well, because it's almost Medicaid. So the question is, what are they paying? And do the people who qualify for subsidized health insurance, do they then get a pass on paying any extra amount because they're considered low income?
Great. Thank you, Dora.
Can I?
Very briefly, but we got other.
Is that a policy decision?
No. I mean, you sort of said it yourself. It's subsidized, right? So the total cost of the policy is $700. That's a made-up number, but and then like the government kicks in 600, and you pay 100, right? That's how much it costs to have that policy each month, and that policy has allowable rates for all kinds of things and coverage for all kinds of things. But the policies themselves are fairly comparable, right? There is a range. But the subsidy varies depending on your income. But it's just somebody else is paying it instead of you.
Okay. So I don't see Dick. Quick follow-up, and then I'll look to the board for any final questions on this subcategory of agenda item 9D.
Page 107, it's with the questions that came in, the RFI questions. And it's question,
Well, we're not.
well, I just want to,
Wait, Dick. We're not on that. Let's wait till we get to that item after we've got a presentation on.
this is coming next.
What's that?
This is coming next?
Yeah. You're on 10? Sorry, let me make sure. But if it's about the RFP or RFI.
Well, yeah. Well, it was just questions that were attached, and I can wait.
Yeah. Let's have a presentation on that first. Okay, great. Franz.
Something struck me that maybe it was addressed previously and I can't remember, but Patrick, in your estimates, you included the staffing costs for advanced EMTs to be added to the force. How about paramedics? AEMTs are great, but we're talking about a paramedic qualified service, I think, and are those data in there somewhere, or what's up with that?
So our pay charts are tiered, right? So depending upon one's qualifications, EMTs at one rate, AEMTs at a different rate, paramedics at yet a different rate. For the purposes of putting together analysis, we chose the sort of middle of the road approach, recognizing that when we go through the process of hiring people, some are going to turn out to be EMTs. We may be fortunate and able to hire some paramedics. I don't think everyone's going to be a paramedic, so we chose a middle of the road approach for the purposes of putting together a cost analysis.
And how much more would it be for paramedics than AEMTs?
I would need to calculate that.
Okay.
Did you have another question?
Well, I did have one other, but it's for these guys here. So it's kind of a follow-up on my earlier question about first response and, effective force requirements and stuff like that. If we've got 10 people on a shift, and you said a cardiac arrest response requires 6 of those people, we're now down to 4 who are left at the station or available. What happens in that case?
As soon as whoever's in charge on the scene of the cardiac arrest, as soon as they say CPR is in progress, dispatch knows to automatically call back 4 people.
So that would be a callback of 4.
Right.
What happens if you have 2 cardiac arrests?
Well,
They just keep calling people in?
keep calling and we'll call mutual aid and come in.
So at a certain point, mutual aid gets involved. When would that be usually? What are scenarios where, I know it hasn't happened much, but when might you foresee something like that happening?
For a mutual aid request?
Yeah,
For instance, if you said we had 2 cardiac arrests going on at once, that's an example.
or how about a motor vehicle crash and something else? That presumably takes a lot of people too.
That's a discretion that the officer in charge will call and tell them whether to either call in more people or call back mutual aid to cover our station.
So those are things that can happen, but the way to evaluate it is by looking at the statistics for, say, a year and see how often that happens.
Yep.
Okay,
You
thank you.
asked me that a year ago, I couldn't tell you. Now that we've done it for a year, I feel much more comfortable.
Got it.
Thank you, Franz. Any other board members on this sub-item? No? Okay, so we are going to move on to new business agenda item D, III, which is update on the contracted EMS track, both the RFI responses and draft RFP considerations. Turn it over to John.
Thank you. So we issued a RFI, a request for information, on June 1st, and we received 2 responses to those. And that was our attempt to try to get information about whether there are interested providers out there that would wish to participate in a request for proposals, and also to get some initial feedback from them about what we might incorporate into a request for proposals. There's a summary of the 2 responses that we received in your backup materials, as well as redacted copies of each RFI that we received. We took information from those, as well as other information that we developed internally around the needs of the potential needs of the town, and we prepared a draft request for proposals based on that feedback and information for the public, for you and the public to review and consider at this point. A copy of that draft is in your packet on page 229. Thank you, Ian. And the purpose of this request for proposals is to solicit proposals for an EMS ambulance contract to provide the town of Brattleboro and our residents and our visitors with comprehensive EMS ambulance service, including high-quality emergency medical services given to the town in a professional manner and with great customer satisfaction. In this request for proposals, we, based on the feedback that we got in the RFIs, we allowed for a very flexible ability to respond. So we will entertain EMS approaches, including ones that provide dedicated ambulances just to the town of Brattleboro, as well as proposals that would rely on ambulances that are shared across a range of municipalities. We also would consider approaches that would rely on fire department personnel for first response, as well as proposals that would not. So we're really looking at that full range. We would love to get, one of each or multiple ones of each, so that we could then really be able to compare the costs of any one of those approaches with the municipal approach so that you could have the best information on the table possible in September. Also included in this RFP, this draft RFP, are requirements for submitting a proposal to the town, what you need to do. Proposers will have to read that very carefully to make sure that they follow the instructions correctly. It also describes how those proposals would be evaluated. And our sense of what our approach there is that an evaluation team would apply that criteria to any proposals that we got in order to rank them when we brought them back to the board. Our expectation is that we would release this request for proposals on or about August 1st, and we would be looking to have proposals due on August 29th. So giving proposers like around 4 weeks to put this together. There's also a period for asking questions and a period for receiving any addenda, any changes to the RFP. So after incorporating any feedback received from the select board, at this meeting, staff will send out the RFP in the same manner as we described that we released the RFI, and we have a long list of places that we would send that out and post it and advertise it, and hope to get multiple proposals back. So we're happy to step through a more detailed summary of what's in the RFP if you would like, or just answer questions that you may have.
Or do you want to start with just questions, and if we need to get into a more detailed analysis, we can? Or we can have John go through it, whatever feels more appropriate. Let's start. Yeah, Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, I've read it, obviously.
Yeah.
And I've read it in detail. And I am not a RFP producer. That is oftentimes way above my pay grade. But it seems to me to be a clear request for proposals. And I guess the only one thing I would want to say is, like, if the rest of this board is happy with the RFP, and what are we on today, the 25th or something? Let's not wait until the beginning of the month to get it out there. You know, it can take it's going to take a while for people to respond fully to it. They're going to need to maybe talk with governance bodies and that kind of thing. And, you know, there's a bit of lag time there. So I would say if we're happy with the RFP tonight, let's get it out tomorrow.
Oh, or as soon as
ASAP, right?
Board, is there general head nods on that?
I don't disagree with Daniel. I think that if we are good to go, we feel comfortable, and I've felt that this whole process has been transparent and we can start to gather information sooner, then I'm wholeheartedly support that thought.
Liz?
Well, unlike Daniel, I do write RFPs and I respond to them. And I think this is clear and it meets our goal to solicit a contractor. And so I'm ready for it to be released whenever the town is ready.
That's 3 right there, John.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Doesn't matter what fronts are.
But
I'm sorry, fronts always matters.
Can we try to convince them otherwise?
Oh, please.
I don't want to. I think it's a reasonable suggestion.
Okay.
So there is one unforgivable mistake in the RFP. It says that the term of the contract awarded from this RFP will be for 1,825 consecutive calendar days, 5 years, starting on July 1st, 2024. And I believe you have left out Leap Day 2028. It's actually 1,826 consecutive days.
Thank you, Franz.
You're welcome.
Were you sitting on that, or did you just calculate it?
I just realized it now.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank God you're here, Franz.
Any
Brattleboro, you're welcome.
Other questions or comments, board, on the?
You want to just say 5 years?
Oh, yes, we could do that.
Yeah. Other questions or comments before we hear from the public? No. I would just say, given the board's desire to put this out sooner, which I think is very reasonable, can we keep the deadline for questions out as far? So I think it was August 15th was the deadline. I think it makes sense to give people an opportunity to respond sooner, but let's give them that time to consider for questions and not move that up as well.
Okay.
Cool. Is that, and then we're okay with that?
Yes.
I did have two other minor things. Well, one's not so minor and one's minor.
Yes.
Not in this draft, but what has come up in the meantime is a suggestion that we add a sample contract to the back of this RFP so that potential proposers would know kind of what the boilerplate that a town contract might have in it, because that could potentially affect the price that they would offer on the, so if three of you are generally okay with adding a sample contract to the back of this, then, okay. So
Is that generally
Yes.
acceptable practice?
Yes,
Okay.
it's very typical.
Okay.
The other thing that was suggested was, we just asked for one copy of the RFP in here, but the suggestion has been made that we ask for 5 copies so that it's just easier to pass them out to an evaluation committee or to yourselves when we are distributing them. But not a big deal, but if you're okay with that, I would
Absolutely.
make that change too, so. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're the boss.
Head nods on the 5 copies over 1 copy? No.
Another arithmetic? Never mind.
Okay.
I'm fine with that. And let me just also add, I don't look at RFPs or write RFPs, but I thought this was really good and really clear and should enable whoever wants to respond very effectively, I would think.
Thanks, Franz.
Great. Okay, let's hear from members of the public. I don't have any hands on Zoom, so anybody in the room? I see Bob.
We'll just, Bob Ozer, Brattleboro, we'll just say this for the record. So after reviewing the RFI, it appears there's a corporate interest involved. So what was your decision? How did your decision come about to redact the RFI? And then question number 2, is the RFP unduly restricted? You have a default procurement manual, and on page 19 it says that an RFP shall incorporate a clear, concise description of the technical requirements for the material, product, or service to be procured, but the description shall not, in competitive procurements, contain features that unduly restrict competition. So does your RFP violate your policy?
What?
Can you just give me the page number for the second thing one more time?
Sure, that's page 19.
I'm just trying to find where he's talking about.
I mean, I can address.
We'll have, I'm just trying to find what you're reading, so. What's
Correct the record on that. Not page 19 in the backup material, but page 19 of your default procurement manual.
Oh, okay.
We don't have
Yeah.
here.
I can send you the link if you want, but
Thank you.
then we'd
Okay.
be communicating
Thank you.
privately.
So the decision to redact the RFIs was just, we're in the middle of a procurement process here, and we didn't want to contribute to any collusion or any malfeasance on the bidding. So we just decided that it was more proper to redact those for the time being. We'll make all those materials available to the public once we're complete with the procurement process, so it's nothing that won't be shared ultimately. I don't see this RFP as unduly restricting competition at all. If anything, it's very open to multiple ways to compete on price and scope. So I think it's clearly consistent with our procurement policies, such as they are.
But we'll make sure, we'll have Town Attorney Bob Fisher take a look at it, make sure that we're in compliance with our procedures.
And I have asked Town Attorney Bob Fisher that same question. He said it's perfectly good, consistent with our procurement policies. So.
And I think the hope is that we have an RFP that really can allow for a lot of different proposals so that we are exploring all the options possible in both the tracks here. So I hear the point, Bob, and let's make sure that we're complying with our own rules. And but I appreciate John's point that it is open. Dora, unless I see no.
So to be a little more specific about Bob's point, Dora Bubalis, Brattleboro, you only got 2 responses to the RFI. Your RFP might take into consideration some of those responses to make it difficult for one entity to apply. You're not going to get a lot of applications. I think you're aware of that. So the competition piece is what he's talking about, and it's specifically related to the fact that you know that it's most likely going to be 2 entities applying for it.
I think just an important point is that applying for the RFI you didn't need to submit for the RFI to submit to the RFP. So there is no, I think you can make assumptions, but they're just assumptions until we know who's submitted for the RFP. I guess I don't really understand the competition issue, but I
don't understand it either. I think you might be mistaken. There was no requirement to submit on the RFI and then to be able to submit an RFP. So we will welcome all comers at this point, and hope to have their proposals. That's as openly competitive as you could possibly be.
Other hands in the room? No hands in Zoom. Board members, any other questions or comments? I can't even see Daniel.
No, he's still here.
No? Okay. So in that case, I think we've gotten pretty... is all the guidance clear on this?
Got great direction. Thank you very much.
Great. And there's no need for a vote there. But let's just make sure now that we're changing that when the RFP request is going out, we're not doing August 1st, we're going to go sooner to allow for as much time as possible. I just would really ask the town administration to ensure that we really push that out there and make sure people know when it goes out.
Yep.
I agree with the board that it's better to have more time, but now that we're not doing it on August 1st, it's sooner, so let's just get that out into the world.
Yes, we will.
Can I make a final comment?
Please, Franz.
I'd like to thank everybody out there who came to be with us for this discussion tonight. For all the different comments that were made and for the careful consideration of the process that we're going through. We're really relying on everybody to help us get through this and make the best possible decision. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Franz. Other last comments? No? Okay, so we will move on to, Chief and AC Kier, thank you very much for sitting here through it with us and for the presentation before. Okay, we're going to move on to new business agenda item 9E, which is Living Memorial Park Generational Improvement Project update. Am I going to invite
Carol.
Just Carol or?
Just Carol.
Carol, okay, great.
And Carol will give us an update.
Good evening.
Hi, Carol.
Good evening.
Carol.
So I'm here this evening to, we've hit the new fiscal year, and I just wanted to give you an update, which I hope to be doing periodically as we go through the process. As the finance director, later in the year, November, will apply for the bond. But in the meantime, there's a lot of legwork and planning that needs to happen leading up to that and not waiting until November to make all that happen. So that's basically what I'm here to tell you tonight. How we're starting to build that path and move forward. At this point, a lot of it is putting out, as you just talked about, requests for proposals for architects for all the projects within the skating facility, which includes the new roof, upgrading the R22, replacing the fire alarm system, the lighting, the dehumidification. And so we're going to need engineers for all those different disciplines. So I just didn't want you reading about them in the paper, saying, hey, where's this money coming from? We're not applying for the funding until November. How's this happening? So there is, as outlined in the memo, a little over $120,000 in the current budget from the unassigned fund balance that we can focus towards this project that was intended for this project as we start to develop these RFPs and start the path. And the whole goal here is to start lining this stuff up. So for example, when the skating rink closes in March, that we're ready to go. When, the softball season ends a year from this August, we're ready to upgrade the lights. I think the biggest chess piece that we're going to have is the maintenance building. But my number one goal in this whole process is to make sure that there's the least disruptions to all programs and park users. But more importantly is getting a lot of this planning and legwork done. Because some of these projects will require Act 250 permitting. And as we all know, that's going to take, I've got a project that I went before the board on, the DRB, back in April or March, and we still don't have an answer as to moving forward for a very small project for a pump track at Living Memorial. So that's why we want to start get moving in the direction so that we can start securing all those RFPs, start working on the permit in both state and local permitting.
Great.
And it's more just like an FYI at this point.
Carol, thank you so much for the presentation. I think the board and the public really appreciates the check-in on it. This is a really important project to the community, and it's always nice to sort of see the process as it's moving, as opposed to sort of it being a ton of work being done and then a year goes by, and then so I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, and I suspect that you'll probably see me here in the next 2 or 3 months as we start to secure architects and engineers and moving forward with all these projects.
Yeah, absolutely. Board members, questions or comments for Carol? Liz.
Carol, I just want to thank you and acknowledge that it was a big ask at town meeting, but it was, very well received. And everyone, does support this project, but I think it's important because of the magnitude of the project that you do keep us informed, and I appreciate it. And I would also just suggest that we ask our legislative delegation to give the Act 250 people a nudge.
Oh, very good feedback there. Very good feedback.
Fair point. Other board members? No. Look to the public. Kate.
Kate O'Connor, Brattleboro. I'm sorry to ask a question this late.
I'll apologize.
But Carol just said she's going to be talking to architects and whatever. As you know, I thought spending $724,000 on a maintenance building was way too much. And someone other than me got up at town meeting and asked the question, can you look it over and possibly lower the cost? And there were heads nod from certain select board members. So we're sitting at the front of at the high school gym. So I'm just wondering, are you going to make an effort to lower the cost, or is that just head nods?
From the chair that I sit in, Kate, and I think you know me from the years that I've sat in this chair, I always like to put the sharpest pen to the paper, And I'll continue to do that through this entire process. You know, because the sharper the pen is, the less money that's going to have to be raised. In that, and that's, you know, we don't want to compromise the project at all, but it's certainly making sure that we're getting the best bang for a buck for the town and the town citizens.
Bless you.
And so for that particular issue, like the next time that Kate could come on that particular one would be when an RFP was being, when we were voting to accept, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we could discuss it again there, and that's true for all of the, yeah, okay. John, I saw your hand.
No.
Okay, Liz.
Well, I just want to mention that that process, you know, there's a certain risk involved, and there may be lower than anticipated or higher than anticipated costs.
Which is why it's good to have a sharp pen, which is now something I'm going to say. I like that.
How about a sharp pencil, but
Oh,
I
sharp
think
pen.
I said pen.
Yeah, oh, no, I could.
But it's almost 10.
Yeah. Other questions from the community? Seeing none. Board
lend you
members,
this
I
pen.
don't
It's extra
believe there was a
fine.
motion on that either.
No, it's an update.
No, okay. Well, Carol, thank you so much for the update. We really appreciate it. And unless I missed it.
No.
No? Okay. Yeah, thank you so much.
I hope to see you all Monday at the park.
Oh, yeah.
Sometime between the hours of 9:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. and, you know, sharing your thoughts on how we will shape the future of the future of the pool project.
And is it at the pool or?
It is at the pool.
Great.
Is it in the pool?
You can bring your bathing suit, yeah. It'll be inside the pool area, so people actually have the opportunity to walk through the pool house it will be out in the grass area behind the pool. So people have that opportunity to walk through the bathrooms and stuff and the pool deck and stuff.
Great.
So please come up, have a glass of lemonade, share your thoughts.
Incredibly wholesome.
Wire
Great.
vodka.
Liz.
I move to adjourn.
Oh.
Liz has
gonna
made a
say
motion to
something.
adjourn before 10 o'clock. Board members, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's going to carry 5-0. Thank you very much to BCTV. Thank you to our interpreters. Patrick, thank you so much for running the Zoom. And thank you very much, John, and all the municipal staff. Meeting adjourned.